across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
I'm absolutely staggered. Good afternoon. Welcome to the home of common sense. So much going on here and such little time. We'll cram it all into the next 3 hours if we can. Andy Burnham holding his first meeting at the brand new number 10 North in Manchester today, shifting decisions and on devolution, economic growth away from Westminster. Of course, it's a move critics say confirms fears his premiership will tilt power and resources firmly northwards at everybody else's expense. He's got to be careful. The new Prime Minister has also been forced to halt the early release of prisoners after public fury erupted, of course, after the story that we broke of PC Harper's killers facing freedom, plunging an already overcrowded prison system into fresh chaos just weeks before thousands were due to be released. It's a flipping mess, and it's now on Burnham's doorstep. And Britain's first drought of the summer has been declared in parts of Wales after record-breaking heat waves, with hosepipe bans now affecting 23 million households and wildfires raging from North Wales to the Cairngorms. It's a pretty grim picture out there, but at least it's nice and warm. Lots to get through, loads of breaking news, everything you need to know. 0344 499 1000 is where you will find us. So, it's a Friday. It's Burnham's week 1, and he's off to the cobbles. Andy Burnham has finally clocked in to his new shiny northern office. The symbolism is obvious, but what exactly does it all change? Are trains suddenly running on time? Has NHS waiting list disappeared? Has productivity magically increased because our Prime Minister is sitting behind a different desk in a different postcode? Of course they haven't. The promise is that this makes the North feel represented. But answer me this, honestly, were the people of Manchester somehow feeling unrepresented yesterday, but today everything's hunky-dory? Real power doesn't come from a postcode. It comes from decisions, budgets and results. If those stay the same, then this is politics dressed up as theatre. Gimmicks have no shelf life, Andy. Do you know that would make a cracking... You can almost see Ken walking in behind him at the desk there. I mean, it's hard to escape the conclusion that this is branding masquerading as bold reform. A new office, a new plaque, a fresh round of headlines, but precious little substance. If Burnham wants to prove this isn't a gimmick, the answer is simple. Stop talking about where you're working and start demonstrating why you're going to make Britain great again. 0344 499 1000. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister needs to be concentrating on bigger things like this.
The job of number 10 North will be to make power flow into the Midlands, into the southwest, into the east of England, and yes, into London, as I said before, as much as into the northeast, Yorkshire and the Humber, and here in the northwest. It will be about offering new opportunities to extend devolution in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland by taking power deeper down.
Yeah. Well, in addition to all of that, what else is on his plate? He paused the early release of prisoners. Now, politically, this is a really interesting one, because that, generally speaking, would get most people going, yeah, absolutely right. The last thing we want are people like the murderers, or the killers, I should say, to be legally correct, of PC Harper to be released. We don't want those people released. It sounds, politically, it sounds tough. But what happens when the prisons are full? So good intentions collide with hard reality. Unless thousands of extra prison places appear overnight, this decision could become literally impossible to sustain within a matter of weeks. Perhaps the answer, though, and look, I'm no legal brain. I've never worked at the Department of Justice. I've never been the Home Secretary. I've never been, not even the Justice Secretary, you might be surprised to know. But maybe the answer is actually quite simple. This is so simple that there must be someone's going to say, yes, not that easy, mate. Violent offenders, all right, as a matter of policy, should always serve their full custodial sentence. We don't want people like this. We don't want animals back on our street. We want them to serve their full sentence. Public protection comes first. But for many non-violent offenders, prisons are so often just an expensive revolving door rather than any kind of effective solution. So instead, impose punishments that are genuinely demanding. Intensive unpaid work, strict electronic tagging. We've talked about this before. Throw curfews in there. Mandatory employment or training. Compulsory victim compensation. Rigorous daily supervision. Make offenders repay society instead of simply costing it money. Because that's all that happens with those people. The non-violent kind of... the characters, I don't know whether it's a bit of theft or fraud, or serious offences in their own right. But is sticking somebody in a holding pen for 6 months, a year, whatever, does that solve the problem here? I sense it doesn't. If you get somebody who can put something back into the community outside the prison, tagged, curfewed, monitored, all of the above, isn't that the most obvious answer to this one? There must be, I would say, tens of thousands of prisoners who fit the bill there. Reserve prison for those who truly threaten the public. Punish everyone else in ways that are visible, uncompromising and productive, that they make sense. That approach would ease pressure on overcrowding prisons while maintaining confidence that crime carries real consequences. And the other thing I'd do, that would be all foreign prisoners. I would either deport at the end of their sentence completely, or I'd deport them now. Just get rid now. Done, deal. Oh, yeah, but there's a human right to... Don't know. None of that. That's where you want to see Burnham make the real difference, not making an announcement about pausing early release that he can't sustain. That will quietly disappear. 0344 499 1000. Can I ask you this, by the way? So back to the first point. There's two things up and running here. Number 10 North, will it make any difference? If you live, let's say, north of Leicester, does your life today feel infinitely better than it did yesterday because Andy Burnham is treading the cobbles of Manchester in his shiny new office? Did you wake up this morning with a different feeling, like a weight off your shoulder, like something had happened, almost that you were part of a revolution, and a tangible feeling of joy, a spring in your step as you went to work this morning, because you thought, yesterday life was rubbish. Today, Andy's in the north. Everything's brilliant. I want to know your views on that. 0344 499 1000. Did you feel underrepresented, I suppose, is the non-facetious way of putting it. And secondly, the obvious question, how do we fix Britain's prison crisis? I think I've done it there. I don't know why Andy Burnham can't do what I just said he should do. It makes common sense. David Wooding is with us, political journalist, Sun columnist, always a man with some common sense views on these things. How are you feeling today, Dave? Because you are from the north, you're a Scouser, so you are well above Leicester in my magic line I've drawn across the country. Did you wake up with that euphoric feeling this morning?
I woke up feeling a little bit fed up of hearing about Manchester. I mean, if you
is that just a Liverpool-Manchester thing?
Well, no, but if he'd suddenly...
It's not football, Dave. I know who your team are.
If he'd suddenly said, we're going to run the country through Scousism or Brumism or Bristolism, you know, what would people think? And it's just that... He said in his speech this morning when he stood outside the steps of number 10 North that people will say this is a gimmick. Yes. People will say that it's just levelling up by another name. Yes. People will say, how much is this costing? Yes. Now, his defence is that people shouldn't have to get on the train to come to London when there's a meeting. Well, people shouldn't have to get on the train to Manchester when there's a meeting. The truth is that the seat of government is in Westminster, and when there are meetings with cabinet ministers, some of them are going to have to go up to Manchester to hold these meetings with local representatives. Yeah. And it might knock a few... I mean, I tell you what, having lived in the north, getting from somewhere like Scunthorpe to Manchester is a lot more difficult than getting from Manchester to London, where you've got a direct train line. Yeah. So things are going to be made a bit different. And I think it might play well in some respects, in that... I remember my dad used to say, you know, why are they building a new Wembley in in Wembley, in London. Why are they building a new national stadium at Wembley? They should have it in the Midlands so that we can all get there. That does make sense, you know, it's easier to travel for everybody. But the reason they build it in London is because it's a capital city and this is where the showpiece finals should be held.
Yeah,
and it's part and parcel of our history.
You can't apologise for the capital city.
No.
It should be said, by the way, that Mr Burnham didn't take a train either, because he took a plane to Glasgow last night for the Commonwealth Games opening, then another plane back to Manchester. Yeah. Meanwhile, his entire entourage had to drive up the motorway, up the M6, M1, whatever, get to his new... so they could pick him up from the airport. So that involved all those cars, all those personnel, all those staff. I mean, it seems a big waste of money.
Yeah, and again, every week when he goes up there on a Friday, your terrorists will know, oh, Andy Burnham goes up to Manchester from London on a Friday morning.
It's a bit specific, isn't it?
So he is going to have... they're going to have to have various routes. They're not going to be able to stick him on a train or drive him by car up the M1. He's going to have to fly there or do it. So this is going to be really costly. And as I say, people in the north might think it's showing... it is a gimmick. It's showing that we're doing something. It can be just as well done from the south. Do you remember Michael Heseltine going to Liverpool in the 1980s after the Toxteth riots and doing some work and revitalising the city centre? He did really well. He did that from London. He had a little office he went to in there, but he wasn't the Prime Minister.
And there he is. You can see, if you're watching this on our YouTube feed, there's Andy walking around his new office. Is that Louise Haigh? I'm not sure. It could be a bit Louisey, filling out a claims form for a lost mobile. And there he is. He's down there, he's shaking hands. He's got no idea who all these people... they're all clapping as well as he walks through the corridors. Of a picture of Lowry on the wall. There isn't, but there will be. You know, there's all of that going on, isn't there?
That'll remind him what Britain was like in the 1970s.
Absolutely, yeah. The Hilda Ogden wing of the new office. I mean, it's all there, isn't it? Everything is fantastic. What does it achieve? I mean, that genuine question. What does it really achieve? There's a symbolism to it. I thought, you know, bearing in mind... this is an area of which he was the mayor. So it's not as if it was underrepresented. It's not as if it didn't have already a level of autonomy. Canterbury in Kent doesn't have any autonomy or a mayor. Well, it's got a mayor, but not one of those mayors.
Yeah, and there's parts of Britain who do feel that element of being left out. I mean, and Liverpool being one of them, but, you know, Cornwall is another one where there's extreme poverty.
Huge.
Beautiful beaches, great holiday homes, but the people who live there, there's a intense poverty there, and they will feel left out. So unless he delivers, this is going to amount to nothing more than just a bit of tokenism.
If I lived in Cornwall and I was thinking of opening a bar, I would call it Number 10 South West.
That's a good idea.
I'd have that name before they have it. I don't think he's interested in the South West.
And the people around him are all from Manchester. There's become effectively a Manchester mafia in Westminster, because you have Lucy Powell as the Education Secretary. He's bringing into his office one of the Manchester Council chief executives to be an advisor, and all the Manchester MPs are all forming part of this coterie. You've got Angela Rayner, and people like that who are all...
It's interesting that he's got this sort of, you know, he's talking about sort of diversity and all the rest of it. Not really diversity of class, though, because he's got a huge proportion of privately educated cabinet ministers around him. I think more than possibly any other Prime Minister in recent years.
Well, I think he's probably the only one who didn't go to Oxford.
Yes.
He went to Cambridge.
He went to Cambridge, yes.
And the other thing is, he's creating a north-south divide rather than healing it, because he's actually highlighting there's a north and the south, and that he's going to favour the north in what he does.
Well, if you live in that neck of the woods, if you are... I'd love to hear from him. If he's your MP now, if you're in Makerfield, then, you know, let us know. Does the future look bright this morning?
Maybe they will. I mean, Gordon Brown was a Scottish MP, but you didn't get Gordon Brown saying, I'm going to do something about Scotland.
Yes.
You know, I mean, Scotland is the truth is that the Prime Minister is the Prime Minister of the whole country, but perhaps he's just tilted the balance a little too far.
Yeah, and I wonder what specifically, what the overall manifestation is. Well, you know, if you fast forward a couple of years, what will be the kind of dynamics of this? What will the change be? Will there be a kind of tangible thing you can point to and go, oh, that would never have happened had he not opened a an office in Deansgate or wherever it is.
Maybe he'll surprise us. I mean, it would be great if he revitalised the north of England. I think it would be fantastic, and he'd walk home. But a lot of the people in the north feel that they've been left behind. But he's going to have to deliver some real results.
And of course it will naturally, as we've already gone over some of this, but you know, if you some of the greatest areas of deprivation are in the capital city, so there's that. There's areas of London that are, you know, so poverty stricken it would make, you know, people blush in parts of the north. There's areas, you know, Kent is always looked at as this, you know, beautiful garden of England. Of course, it's a lovely county. Most counties have lovely parts, but I mean, have you ever been to Chatham, for goodness sake? Apologies to all of our listeners and viewers in Chatham, by the way, but that could do with a liquor paint, frankly.
There,
you know.
And of course, rural areas. There's rural areas all over the country that feel now that they might be being neglected. Don't forget, of course, the old coastal towns like Blackpool and you know, Clacton-on-Sea, I suppose, and places like that, which have fallen behind. They were quite prosperous areas before foreign holidays, and now they're really completely broken.
You drive through some of the, you know, the kind of rural areas of Kent, and there's just fields, and there's like sheep and stuff in them, cows and things, you know, and you think, wow, where's all the people?
They've all gone to Manchester. They've gone to Manchester for the boom town.
That's where they've gone. We're going to talk some more. We're going to talk about Burnham's early release, because this is meant to be, you know, a moment that enamours Burnham to an audience that perhaps wouldn't normally have gone, yeah, he's on the money. But beware of what your Prime Minister does in our name, because there's real bear traps in this problem. We'll talk about that in a couple of moments' time. David Wooding is with us. Lots more to come. Over to you as well. 0344 499 1000. Number 10 North up and running week 1. And is there on the cobbles? Thoughts on that? And how should we fix the prisons? I mean, genuine question. It's bizarre that in the 21st century, here we are talking about this. I'm sure Victorians back in the day would have thought, oh, we got all, you know, they were locking up people for all manner of offences and chopping their heads off or hanging them if they did the wrong thing. They would have probably, our forefathers would have probably thought, well, by probably 2026, they'll have this justice thing sorted. We haven't. It's got worse. What's the answer? Lines are open. This is Talk.
A 78-year-old Anne Widdecombe was bashed on the head repeatedly with a hammer until she died. Palestine Action is advertising direct action training using hammers.
And I'm sorry, but this is what happens when you import not just sort of, frankly, foreign or very un-British sort of cultural issues like Palestine, but when you actually tolerate the behaviour as well. Everybody knows that struggle is typified by brutal violence. We don't want that here.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. 0344 499 1000. This comes from Glenn from Labour Leeds, who says, as a Tory from Leeds and also a Leeds United fan, number 10 Manchester is my worst nightmare. By the way, who plays number 10? at United. Any thoughts? I'm just intrigued.
Don't know, I only watch them twice a season. Home and away.
That's the way to do it. Leslie in Suffolk, thank you, Glenn, for that. Leslie in Suffolk says, Ian, hasn't Andy Burnham ever heard of Teams? This is 2026, as in Teams, as in Zoom. It's a good point, isn't it? I mean, you don't need to be doing all this. I mean, Ed Miliband would do well to learn that if he wants to save the planet, and while simultaneously now being the Foreign Secretary, which still sounds a bit weird saying that out loud, then you don't need to be flying all over the place.
No, I've come down here from Liverpool today, 200 miles.
Exactly.
I will be billing you for it, of course.
Absolutely right.
I could have done it by Teams.
How is Toxteth, by the way? All right? Everything all right?
Great.
Good, glad to hear
We've rebuilt it. It's in good shape.
Absolutely. Let's move to this one. Andy Burnham and, of course, the big prison story. Before he was Prime Minister, by the way, Keir Starmer had loads to say. Let's just row back a bit here. Keir Starmer had loads to say about the Conservatives letting prisoners out early. Once he got the job himself, he did exactly the same thing. Now Andy Burnham has ordered a halt to the scheme entirely. Let's have a reminder, though, of what Starmer said before he became the man doing precisely what he condemned.
Well, I am critical of the Tories' early release scheme because what's happened is that they're releasing early prisoners who should still be in prison.
Yes, that's a very astute observation. They're releasing early people who should still be in prison. Yes, that is the story. Then, of course, he went on to do the same thing. Now, Andy Burnham has come along and said, no, we've got to put a pause on this. The headlines were damning. There was a particularly high-profile case, as in the killers of P.C. Harper, that were due to benefit from this early release, having served, I mean, just such a stupid, crazy, short amount of time for such a horrendous offence. There's going to be a problem here, though, Dave, isn't there? I mean, literally, there are no prison places, and this is going to get slowly worse. So this pause presumably can't last forever.
No, I think he's saying the right things, but what will he be able to do about this? He's paused it to see whether anything can be done about the specifics, and no doubt there'll be some frantic discussions going on behind the scenes to see whether they can in some way block the release of these prisoners. But if you've got an early release scheme, this is going to happen. People are going to get out early, and it was almost spun as if the driver of that car on the P.C. Harper killing, what was his name? Henry Long. That he was saying he won't be released early. Well,
yes,
no,
the other two.
The other two were, but he was never going to be released early because he had a longer sentence.
Yes.
So
it's not down to Andy Burnham.
No, it's not down to anything. So I think, yeah, he'll be obviously seeing what he can do, but I don't have much hope.
I don't know. I said at you might have heard the intro, Dave, before you came in, but I was just simply making the point. There are lots of non-violent offenders where prison is just completely the wrong. I mean, it's a complete waste of money, and there has to be more effective ways where the person concerned is not getting off scot-free. I know, prison is most people's idea of an utter nightmare. It's a terrifying thought. You'd be locked up in a place like that, and you speak to people who perhaps don't really ordinarily come from a criminal background, but found themselves doing something they shouldn't have done in the jail, and they always, the haunting, constant noise is, through the night and everything. It's not like lights out at 10, lads, and it's all nice and quiet, just horrific. But there must be, so notwithstanding the fact that you do need people to feel that they're being punished, there must be other ways. And whether, I said at the beginning, I've constantly talked about using tags and curfews, which has to be a reasonable way. Why can we not have intensive unpaid work back to the community, victim compensation in some kind of way, stuff where you still feel that you are being punished, but it ain't costing us an arm and a leg, and you're not using up prison space that should be used really for those that are a danger to society.
Absolutely, it's a terrific idea. Restorative justice, I think they call it. Chain gangs, get them in orange jumpsuits and make them go and clear all the hedgerows, save us a lot of money, have them supervised and make them do it. That would be a great punishment, and it would have an impact on double impact. It would.
Well, you'd think so, wouldn't you?
I mean, you could have them painting public buildings and other things like that, but the main issue, the underlying issue, is that nobody has built any new prisons, and we need them. And you keep hearing consecutive governments saying, we're going to be tough on crime, we're going to increase the sentences for this crime and that crime and the other crime. So each time that happens, it cranks up the demands on prisons. So you can't do this without building more capacity.
I mean, is there something? Are we missing something in this? It seems pretty bloody obvious. Everything you and I have just talked about. Just do that, Mr. Burnham. Do that, because it will work. Is somebody going to come along and go, well, sounds like a good idea, but actually it costs more than prison? I doubt whether it does.
No, it doesn't.
But no one's ever done this.
No one's ever done it. The other thing, Ian, is foreign prisoners. If we
100%.
shipped back, if we deported all the foreign prisoners that we have,
it was like 10,000 or something.
That would free up loads of space. But why can't we do it? European Convention on Human Rights and the lack of having a bilateral agreement with the countries. So if we could sort that one out, that would free up prisons. So there's a lot of things that can be done to make space available.
Here's a question. Can you name how many offices of state Grant Shapps had?
I'd say 5.
By the way, I haven't got the answer.
No, but there are...
He was definitely... I think he was a Transport Secretary. He was definitely a Defence Secretary.
And he was Chancellor for a spell, wasn't he?
He was certainly Home Secretary for about 4 days, wasn't he, or something?
He's one of these who... In that spell, there were people moving into really top jobs for about 3 weeks, weren't there? And
that's right.
Around.
But now, and of course he lost his seat at the last 2024, and thought, well, I can come back at the next election. But apparently he can't come back now because Kemi Badenoch has blocked him from standing. It's not necessarily him personally, but it kind of is. But she's got a criteria. You know, if you don't agree with this, this, and this, then you can't stand. And he doesn't agree with. She insists all candidates must support leaving the European Court of Human Rights, scrapping net zero targets, and it's understood that Shapps does not disagree with either of those policies, but he's still somehow in the category of there's no room at the inn for Grant.
Yeah, I think she's trying to show that the Conservative Party has changed. We keep hearing this word change, don't we?
Yeah.
The only change we get is change of Prime Minister every few weeks. But, yeah, she's trying to show she's a new broom. The old guard have been swept out and there's fresh blood being brought into the party, which is not a bad idea. The problem with politics is that when you've had a government kicked out of office, all the people who served in that really need to go to give you a new image. And if you bring them all back again, it gives that link with failure, effectively. I don't even know why Grant Shapps wants to come back, to be honest. You know, you get to a stage, don't you, when you've done all the various offices of state and then you lose your seat.
Yeah,
and then why bother to try and come back again?
The only thing I can think, I think there's a sort of, I think to some of them, he did it for, I don't know how long he was an MP for, but I'm tempted to say it was there I used to do the paper reviews with him on Sky or something years ago. There was a few of those characters that would pitch up back then. James Brokenshire was another, the late James Brokenshire was another one. So he was there a long time. He's got reasonable pension. I'm sure he's got other work going on. But I think to some of them, they just, it becomes part of them, you know, that Westminster life. That, you know, even if you're on the back benches, there's something about being in that building over there that feels like home to these guys.
It's like institutionalised.
I think
institutionalised. It's a gentleman's club in a way.
It really is.
Westminster.
Yeah.
The bars and the restaurants and the gossip and the whole business of being in the Palace of Westminster. Yeah. Sometimes people get hooked on it.
Phil says, good afternoon. Number 10 in the north. The only thing I want to know is, will he have a cat? Or a whippet called Compo. Or a whippet called Wilf, maybe. Wilf the Whippet. Great. Maybe. Thank you, Phil, for that. Ian in Bloxwich says, I do some work for a company in Manchester, and they said they thought they'd finally got rid of Burnham as mayor, so not overly happy that he's come back. Fair point, isn't it? If you weren't a supporter of Andy Burnham, and you suddenly realise, oh, thank Lord for that, he's walked the plank, only to discover every Friday, set your clock by it, he's back.
Here's another thing, Ian. Where's he going to live when he's in Manchester? Because I bet his house, which is just down the road, down the East Lancs Road from there, in a place called Golborne, which is an old pit village, I reckon he can't live there at the moment because they'd have to do a security overhaul. They'd have to put CCTV cameras, special locks, safety. They'd have to have round-the-clock police surveillance, and it might be close to, I don't know, the school or a pub or something. So
maybe when we were looking at those pictures of him inside his new office, there's like a lot of. I'd like to think one of those sofas is a sort of sofa bed.
Maybe he can sleep.
One of those kind of IKEA pull-out numbers. Maybe he'll just kip under the desk, and then go and watch a bit of Everton the next day. If he's there on a Friday, he can do a Saturday fixture. And then back to London.
Well, there's another thing. He said he was going to go and watch Everton in his usual seat.
No, he's not.
That's going to be difficult. I mean, can you imagine Prime Minister just walking in and getting his pie and his pint and sitting in his seat? It just doesn't make sense. But
Wilf the Whippet next to him as well. What's he going to do? It's not going to be dull, that's for sure. Dave, thank you. Pleasure to see you. Dave Wooding with us here on the programme. 0344 499 1000. Couple of voices coming on as well, representing the North and the views around all of that. We'll do that in a couple of moments. And, of course, over to you. And prisons, really intrigued by the prisons, your suggestions. We came up with some suggestions here. Tell me why they wouldn't work, because I think they can. No one's ever done it. Lines are open. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is indeed Talk 25 to 2. Mark says, I think your suggestion of unpaid workers' punishment is brilliant. It's a no-brainer. I mean, it has to be a no-brainer, doesn't it? I mean, there's no area that couldn't do with that kind of boost. I know it's the obvious stuff that people talk about, you know, litter picking, like community service. Whatever happened to that? I mean, I'm not suggesting, by the way, I'm not necessarily a big fan of people being put in orange jumpsuits and chain ganged down the M6 or something so that people can, I mean, especially in the world we live in now where everyone's got a flipping camera in their pocket. I mean, you can only imagine the memes and the, you know, the Farage woman shouting out the car at him. There'd be those kind of those moments all day long. That is a great clip, by the way. Everybody was safe. Thank you, Mark, for that. Yeah, it seems obvious to me. That's the route you would go down. I know it needs a bit more exploring, and I'm sure there's some practicalities you'd have to sort out, but surely it has to be on the list, on the to-do list over there at the department. So let's talk about this. Mr. Burnham in number 10, but not in Downing Street, in Manchester. Let's speak with Charlotte Pickles, Chief Executive of Restate. That's an independent public services think tank. Charlotte, good afternoon to you. Nice to have you with us. Look, everybody wants to spread the love. You know, there's nothing wrong with representing all parts of the country. I mean, that's, I always thought, is what constituency MPs are there to do. Parliament might well be in London, but it's full of people not from London, because that's how the system works, and it's the capital. But now we've kind of got this new parallel place going on in Manchester. What's your initial thoughts of this?
I think no one is going to dispute the fact that great swathes of the country really does feel like Whitehall, Westminster, is pretty detached from them. So although you're absolutely right, MPs across the country, they'll all be trekking home, or they will have done yesterday evening or today to go back to their constituencies. But I don't think that's quite the same thing as having a part of the central government machine situated somewhere else. Now, obviously, it's only going to work if it's not some sort of token kind of slightly virtue signalling approach where it's just that a bunch of ministers, quotes, work from home sort of thing in their local area on a Friday. It's going to have to actually have serious power and heft behind it. It's going to need to make sure that it's removing civil servants that are sitting in London rather than just duplicating. And it's going to actually have to be the instrument that gives power away from central government to local government.
I mean, Manchester does have quite a lot of local government, of course. In fact, the fellow that's our Prime Minister was in charge of it until half an hour ago. So it's not as if there was no representation. They've got, I don't know how many, specifically how many MPs that would, in the Greater Manchester region, but quite a lot over that area. So there's that. But also, it's an argument that could be made in Canterbury or Plymouth, isn't it? I mean, the same feelings of distance from the... I mean, I live in Sevenoaks, which is, half an hour from London, but I don't feel connected to Whitehall because I live a bit closer to it. Isn't that just the way central government... Well, wherever you put it, the same arguments are going to be forthcoming?
I think if you spoke to a bunch of people in different parts of London, they would share your view there. Just because Whitehall is in London, I don't think people think that it's kind of a part of them. I don't think they have.
Yes, exactly.
Well, they have a great say. So I think you're right on that. But I think the point here is that we want to have some type of institution that gets away from the grip of Whitehall. We as a country are actually one of the most centralised countries out of any developed nation. Like our model is a real outlier internationally. And I think that the aim of, as you say, former mayor moving his part of his number 10 back home is actually to try and give away great swathes of power, great budgets, allow local areas to make decisions about things that matter to them locally. If you live in Canterbury, I live in West London, there'll be different needs in those communities. There's different needs in Liverpool and Hull and Manchester. And actually, what we don't want is just a number 10 replicating what we've got in London, but in Manchester. We want a number 10 in the north that's actually giving away the ability for local areas to make decisions. Because at the moment, Whitehall's holding on so tightly, and this is why we get stuff that doesn't really work for lots of parts of the country.
But I do wonder, I mean, I think there's maybe other things going on there. I mean, I think there's probably chunks of the civil service that suffer from that groupthink kind of, status quo disease, where, this is the way we've always done it. It's not because it favours the South. It's just that they stick to the system. It's too much faff to start monkeying around with new systems and initiatives, etc. I also wonder, Charlotte, on that point of, and you're absolutely right, we are the most centralised democracy in the Western world, but we're also a tiny little country the size of a postage stamp, so maybe that would account for something. The cantons of Germany wouldn't really fit in the same model as the United Kingdom, perhaps.
I mean, of course that will be true, but actually population-wise, we're still bigger than quite a few of the Scandinavian countries, other countries in Europe, and they still have much more devolved models. And I think, again, I come back to that point that even if we are a postage stamp size country, people living in different parts of it still feel like, the centre isn't really doing stuff for them, right? And the services we've got, the way we approach things, as you said, the way sometimes Whitehall feels like it's a bit of a echo chamber, a bit of a bubble deciding its stuff, doesn't work. So we might be small, I think we're still mighty, but actually I do think that trying to devolve, be a bit less centralised, getting away from, a lot of people who sound a lot like, have experiences a lot like each other, trying to spread that out a bit more, I think it's got to be a good thing.
I mean, it visually and symbolically, I understand that kind of vibe. I wonder... It's not a trick question, Charlotte, but fast forward 2 years and you walk down the high street of Makerfield, what do you imagine the tangible benefit of all this would be to the average voter in that specific constituency, obviously Andy Burnham's constituency?
That is the £1 million question, right? I mean, that is exactly the right question to ask. And the difference isn't going to be that there's a number 10 sat in Manchester, right? I mean, that's not going to change anyone's life. What the number 10 in Manchester has to do is it has to enable those communities in Makerfield, in all across the country, to be much closer to the decision making about what matters to them in their areas. So actually, if what the number 10 North model does is give away that power, if it does say, you know what, you local authority over there, you've decided you've got a real issue with antisocial behaviour, you want to focus on that, you go away and do it. You've got the powers to, change a policing model. You've got the budget to make decisions about how you want to tackle that. But actually somewhere else, the big issue is, I don't know, a kind of challenge in health. Well, you've got the power to make a different decision about access to your GPs or, having community health workers or whatever it is. That's what's going to make a difference, not the fact there's a building sitting somewhere with a big, shiny new nameplate on it.
On that point, Charlotte, great to talk. Have a lovely weekend. Thank you for being with us. Charlotte Pickles, Chief Executive of Restate, the independent public services think tank. Will it make a jot of difference? I mean, there's much of what she said at the end there. We didn't have time to pursue it, but things like picking your GP and what's it called? Something choice, isn't it? I think that's been around for a long time anyway, hasn't it? There's no difference. If you live in, we keep saying Canterbury, I don't know what Canterbury's done wrong today, but if you live in Canterbury or whether you live in a part of Manchester, I don't think those things are different. There's the civil service or the law of the land doesn't go, right, here's some laws. If you live below Leicester, then these are the laws for you, and they're all great. And if you live above Leicester, they're all rubbish. You've got different sets of rules. That isn't the case. Let's speak to the columnist and journalist Angela Epstein, based in Manchester. Angela, good afternoon to you. Nice to have you with us. I mean, you're in Manchester right now, is that right?
I am. By the way, I'm hands-free and legal. I've pulled up and parked.
That's good. That's good to know.
I'm in the car.
we're very, we know police officers on this show, so we're very strict on this policy.
It's actually not even my car. I'm in my friend's car.
There you go. Are you feeling better today, though? Are you feel like being there in Manchester? Are you going, wow? There's a new, like a phoenix has risen from the Mancunian ashes in the shape of Andy Burnham in number 10 North.
No, I think it's a piece of political performative gimmickry. I think that what this country needs are big ideas, robust policy, clearly costed initiatives, and moving it 15 minutes down the road from where I live is not going to make a difference to that. I think we've got to think about what the practicalities are, the security, the travel arrangements, the cost of relocating civil servants, also that he can say, oh, well, up north, we're going to be well covered here. There are so many issues that people in the north obviously face, but moving a building 200 miles up the road or using the railway, and I use that line the whole time because I work a bit in London too, and it's a miserable experience, is not going to work. I think it's a ridiculous idea.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing that sort of gets lost in this argument is that most of the people, I say most of the people, a huge chunk of the people, I mean, I'm sitting here in a studio and pretty much no one is from London.
Well, this is it.
If you go to... if you go to Westminster and look at all the civil servants and all the rest of it, so many people are not from London. They come from elsewhere. It's
Absolutely.
A fairly transient place, isn't it?
Well, that's a very important point. I mean, my older two live in London. That's another reason why I go backwards and forwards. And it's not an easy journey to do all the time. He makes it sound seamless, that Andy Burnham, that he'll shuttle between the two. And the other thing is, what I don't understand is we've evolved digitally. Even if I could say the word, my daughter's been travelling in Australia. She can ask me something on WhatsApp, and within seconds I've seen it. I've connected her with the relevant website or contact number that she might need if she's not been able to access it.
Yeah.
That's the kind of world we live in. Bricks and mortar are not going to define the way this country evolves into an energetic and robust, economically productive country.
Indeed. And this was also, I thought, a rather bizarre, and I think we could probably say, no one's really come up with the numbers yet, Angela, but probably expensive hill to die on for Andy Burnham. I mean, the to-do list when you come into number 10 is pretty vast. We've got defence issues, we've got national health issues, huge immigration problems. He's not even mentioned immigration once with all the things he has talked about. And yet the amount of effort and the optics that have gone into this, and this must be costing a lot of money. We would be talking millions, I would imagine, when you begin to crunch the numbers that's involved in the entirety of this rather theatrical experiment he's carrying out.
Absolutely. I mean, look, I've just had my polling cards for the Metro Mayor elections in Manchester, because obviously there was a by-election for a Labour MP to replace a perfectly good Labour MP, as we know. And that's costing something like almost £5 million before we even start looking at what you've absolutely mentioned about the cost of relocating government part-time. And by the way, I've noticed he's chosen a Friday. Is that because it's easier to spend a long weekend in Manchester? That's the day of the week he's going to be working here. I think at the moment the optics are everything's about what's good for the kind of this northern imprint on this new administration, and nothing about what the reality is. And the other thing that I would say is, what does the north mean? Speaking as somebody who's lived her whole life in Manchester, north means north, yes, round here where I live, but when you live in, say, Cumbria or towards the Scottish borders, Manchester is an awful long way away.
Very true.
You know, and if you think about rural communities, suburban communities right over to the east coast and over to the west side, you know, that doesn't mean anything. Manchester won't mean that much. So I just think it's a stupid gimmick, and there's better ways to spend the time and money.
100%. Well, listen, enjoy your weekend, Angela. Thank you for being on with us. Angela Epstein, columnist and journalist based there in Manchester. A lot of people picking up on. Amanda says it's the most appalling and juvenile waste of scarce funds. It beggars belief. I think that's a great word as well. It's quite juvenile. It's kind of a bit sixth form politics, isn't it? Yeah, just move it to Manchester. Give it a northern vibe. You know, it's not... It's sort of a pop culture card that's kind of being played out here. And Andy, who's in Alicante, says, amazing how quickly all the North Number 10 offices infrastructure have been organised. He's only been there. He's only been PM for 2 weeks. He's been MP for 5 days, isn't he? Is it Monday? Anyone would think he'd had this plan many months ago. It is interesting. I'm sure there was a fella, you know, probably plumbing in a sink in that office last night, going, no, mate, this won't be ready till, what, August, September? And then realised, no, it's got to be open tomorrow. I think it was an existing office space that was used administratively previously, or certainly owned by local government in that neck of the woods, in that particular street. But yeah, the speed, it's almost as if someone has just gone, make this happen. We need to see Andy showing up in the prime ministerial motorcade, getting out, greeting the people, walking around the offices. I bet you some of those walls are made of balsa wood and paper mache. Or, as Andy said, the whole lot was, and this would be a great Netflix conspiratorial show, wouldn't it? It was all done and dusted, and there's a plaque with his name on it. It's been there for months. 0344 499 1000. Thoughts on that? Lines are open. This is Talk.
A 78-year-old Anne Widdecombe was bashed on the head repeatedly with a hammer until she died. Palestine Action is advertising direct action training using hammers.
And I'm sorry, but this is what happens when you import not just sort of, frankly, foreign or very un-British sort of cultural issues like Palestine, but when you actually tolerate the behaviour as well. Everybody knows that struggle is typified by brutal violence. We don't want that here.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
One in here from Steve, who says Burnham may be marginally better than Starmer, but let's be honest, the bar was so low it practically needed its own tunnel. Love that. Has anyone worked out the cost of UK PM security living in a different city? It's nothing more than a bad, gimmicky joke. The ramifications, it won't just be the cost. I can only imagine that the people that are charged with looking after, in terms of security, you know, armed police and the whole detail around that, and it's more significant these days than it has been for a long time. Logistically, I would imagine that's a bit of a nightmare that nobody was quite expecting. That would involve more personnel, obviously, because you've got a different team, you're travelling to a completely different city, you've got to get vehicles from A to B. It's, you know, I often think that, you know, when in America, where they have that with booster rockets on, don't they? When Trump just goes to a different city in America, and that entire, what's he got, like 100 cars? It's got to somehow, I mean, in some places they will have their own variants of those cars. But in some cases they're flown over. What's it called? The Beast, isn't it? That big thing that he travels in. That thing's flown around the flipping world. There's more than one of them, but yeah. Alan's in North Yorkshire. What's going on, Alan? How are you doing? And as a proud Yorkshireman and a proud Northerner, are you feeling jubilant today?
Well, as it happens, Governor, I'm the old fella, and I was born in London, Primrose Hill, and I've lived up in Yorkshire for 25 years, and I have never once encountered what is laughingly called a north-south divide. I was a bus driver, and bus drivers, when they get in their canteens and what have you, we have a bit of a laugh. And because having a Cockney accent, they took the mic all, but it was all good stuff. I mean, it was nothing horrible about it. So I like it so much up here. I learned to speak language. We don't all talk like that up here, thou knows. So, you know, what is this? And does Burnham think that the money that's in the government is his to do with as he will?
Well, that's sort of the problem, isn't it? That he's, you know, he's talked about this, like, deconstructing 40 years of political failure from Thatcher onwards. And this is part of the example of that by... it's kind of a fake... It's an argument that doesn't really exist other than in the minds of people like Andy Burnham. And, of course, there's always going to be situations where you feel your neck of the woods has been... I don't mean you specifically, Al, but your neck of the woods has been left out of something, you know, a funding arrangement or something. But that will happen whether you live in Folkestone or whether you live in Felixstowe or whether you live in... I was trying to think of a great northern town beginning with F, but you take my point.
Finally.
There you go. That would do.
Yeah, that would do. But, I mean, the thing is, what is so bonkers about this stupid schoolboy, childish... He's making the country feel there's a problem when there ain't one.
Exactly. And it might well create the problem that he thinks he's solving.
No, he is exactly what he's doing, because everybody I know, and most people I know, have got a brain cell or two.
Yeah.
And not one single person has ever mentioned north-south divide, blah, blah, blah. The only thing that applies to is footy. You know,
that's fair enough. That's fair enough. But then, of course, if you can find probably more Manchester United fans in the south than you'd find in Manchester.
You can find them in Singapore. We go to Singapore occasionally.
Yeah.
And they've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people walking about in Manchester United, or Liverpool.
Well, don't tell Andy Burt there'll be a number 10 Singapore soon, won't there? They'll be opening a little office over there.
They wouldn't have him, mate.
Well, he might be working with the right regime. Who knows? Listen, Alan, I've got to move, but you've been great. Thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Andrew in Hertfordshire. Back to the issue of prisons, Andrew, how we're going to solve this thing. Burnham's put a pause on early release. Where does it go from there, though?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, it's nice that we're focusing on the victims, because some of these people have suffered horrifically. So, unfortunately, we have that foreign criminal large population.
Yeah.
So what he needs to do is to go to the countries where they're from, withdraw the ambassador, end all flights, and then tell them that until they take them back, no money. And it has to be as draconian as that. And let's just pick a country off the top of your head. I don't know. Let's say Pakistan, by way of an example, or India, by way of an example, or Afghanistan. Just do it.
Yep.
And that will show that there's a line in the sand. And then people that are over here that commit crime, they don't want to be in prisons in their own countries, because over here it's easy.
Would you do that at the end of their sentence, or would you do it now?
Well, I personally would do it now.
Yeah.
Because I would hold the countries to account. Because if they ever turn up in this country again, we won't deal with them going forward. They are to look after them, and that's the end of it. And you really have to draw a line in the sand. You know, bring in, let's say, and I'm not picking it, but bring in the Guatemalan ambassador and say, right, you're packing your stuff tomorrow, and you're going, and we have no flights or indirect flights.
But it wouldn't even be. I wouldn't have thought it would even be difficult to. I mean, you are allowed to deport someone from your country, and I don't know how many Albanians it is that are in jail in the UK, but I understand there's a disproportionate number from the last time we talked about this. A stamp to be corrected, by the way. If you were to take that one country and say, right, everyone on Sea Wing who's from Albania, you're going back to Albania tomorrow. I don't know what, we would be surely perfectly entitled to deport someone on the basis they committed a criminal offence.
Yeah, we take them to the airport, their planes are there, we put them on the planes, they fly them home. We're not flying them, they do. Really put that pressure on them. And the other thing is tariffs. Start putting tariffs on, it's worked for Trump, tariffs on the countries that won't take the prisoners back. Do that now. 100%. And then money transfers. Any money that's transferred from here out there.
It's just, well, you see, that's why you need, I mean, I'm not saying Trump is perfect, but that idea of just simply telling it as it is on things like this is precisely what we are lacking in our political DNA in this country. Andrew, great call. Thank you very much indeed for that. 03444991000. James says, I would understand number 10 North if there was a number 10 Wales and Scotland. I really don't think this character is going to unite the United Kingdom. I don't think he is. I think it's going to have the very opposite effect. Our lines are open. Couple of subjects up and running. More of that where it came from on the way on the other side of the news at 2, which is next.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, good afternoon. Welcome back. It is the home of common sense. Coming up on 3 minutes after 2 o'clock, we're talking about Andy Burnham, number 10 North. He's there, day one, in his new Mancunian building, treading the cobbles in order to show true representation and diversity in the United Kingdom. What does it all actually mean? Will it make any difference at all? Seems like a rather expensive, theatrical, performative move, more than anything else. Where will we be in 2 years' time? And if you live north of Leicester, did you wake up this morning feeling more represented than you did yesterday? At the same time, the new Prime Minister has been forced to halt that early release of prisoners after public fury. We know the problems around this. There were meant to be thousands due for release. They're not now. Now, that on the face of it sounds like a rather good thing. There is a problem. We're running out of space. Where do we go next? Surely there are alternatives. Surely there are some sensible answers. We'll explore more in a couple of moments. And Britain's first drought of the summer has been officially declared in parts of Wales after record-breaking heat waves, with hosepipe bans now affecting 23 million households. There's also wildfires out there as well. More details on that to come. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk. 0344 499 1000. Keith says, Ian, travels quite easy when you go by private jet. Yes, I don't know how the Prime Minister flew yesterday, whether it was an EasyJet number, a BA number, or a private jet. But I get it. If you're the Prime Minister, and by the way, I don't have a problem with somebody doing that if they're the Prime Minister. The idea that the Prime Minister is meant to rough it is ridiculous. I don't buy into that. However, Andy Burnham is selling a very different story, and yet travelling on a jet, firstly from London to Glasgow for the opening of the Commonwealth Games, and then from Glasgow down to Manchester for the opening of number 10 North. I don't know how he's getting back after that. Will he spend the weekend in his own constituency? We will watch with interest. Thank you for those. More messages coming in. Cover the subjects up and running. Here we are, of course, talking about Mr Burnham's day one, and one of the other, day one in the new Manchester offices, day 4 or 5 as Prime Minister. But the other thing on his plate, which I think frankly deserves more of his time than wondering whether or not he's got the right colour on the walls of his new office, is that of early release. Now, Mr Burnham has paused that programme entirely at the moment. And, of course, it came really to the highest profile when we discovered that 2 of PC Andrew Harper's killers were found to have qualified for early release. And it's that story that has really informed the wider issue around this. Officials are warning, however, that the pause in the scheme means that prisons run out of space by November. So how do we fix the crisis? Let's speak with Wendy Joseph. KC, former criminal judge at the Old Bailey, has helped us out on many of these kind of stories. Good to see you again, Wendy. I mean, just talk us through this. When you were sentencing people at the Old Bailey, and anywhere before that you would have worked, does a note come from the Department of Justice saying, careful on the custodials here, Judge, because we're full? The scrubs ain't got any wings left.
No, that doesn't happen. Having said that, it did happen once, in the sense that when there was a crisis of prison space not so very long ago, there was encouragement not to deal with cases until, where it was clear the defendant was going to prison, right, there was a place for them. So that, but
so that's a deferring of a trial rather than.
No, I mean, there are 4 things in the mind of a judge who has to pass a sentence, and these are 4 things laid down by the law. There is the element of punishment, and that's what we all talk about. That's what everyone thinks about, getting the right punishment. But there's also the element of deterrence, deterring the offender from doing it again and other people from doing it. There's protection of the public, and there's rehabilitation. And those are the four things a judge is supposed to have in mind. Now, Ian, if you think about it, rehabilitation, there's been so many cuts in prisons, it just isn't happening in any meaningful way. And it will make no difference to rehabilitation whether you let someone out early or late. That is not going to be affected by it. And in a way, the whole question about protecting the public, well, if you don't rehabilitate people and you let them out, the overwhelming likelihood is they're going to offend again and they'll go back in again. So if you let them out early, they'll go back in a bit earlier. So I'm not saying these things aren't important. They are. But in terms of early release, I doubt that they'll make much difference. But the other two elements, deterrence and punishment, they are really going for a long swim down the Swanee with very early release, because you don't deter people if they think they're not going to serve very long. And all these other things have really been about practical ways of dealing with offenders. But the element of punishment is where the morality comes in.
Sure.
It's where the judge says, this is what you pay for the crime you've done. This is the amount of freedom you lose for what you have done to somebody else and to the public. And so I entirely get it if people are up in arms when someone they thought was going to get 15 years actually serves, well, it won't be 5, but let's say 7 or 7.5 years. One can see why people are so upset about it.
Were there times, there's obviously, as a judge, you are the sort of the head of that courtroom, but of course you are also adhering to the laws of the land, and certain crimes obviously will almost always have a custodial sentence for obvious reasons. There are some rare exceptions, as you know better than most. But were you ever in a situation where you thought, I wish there was some other sentence I could give? I'm thinking of, the classic city boy fraudster kind of character who spent 15 years with, half of Peru up his nose while simultaneously ripping off the... it's always a good defence, isn't it, that one? Ripping off the bank he was working for. Now, that's not good, and it's terrible, and it's serious, and the implications are a bit more than somebody just enjoying the fruits of their theft. But you must have been on cases where you thought, isn't there a kind of fairly austere and serious and punishment available that isn't prison? Because this person, there's no point in sending them to jail. It's ridiculous.
I agree. And what I would like to do with someone like that is tell him to put on a pair of overalls and go out and for 2 years clean the streets and pick up litter and, do something. I tell you what we could do, put him on a building course and get him building new prisons. But yes, you're so right. There are much more constructive ways, but all of them require investment. They require structures and infrastructures. And government after government has made cut after cut, and there is so little left out there between fines and prison.
We seem to have stopped thinking... I mean, I think this is generally the case, Wendy, that governments have stopped thinking big. The big idea, there's a sort of an instant... we live in an instant gratification society in many respects, but I think similarly with policy, things, if it can't happen in half an hour, it's kind of thrown into the long grass unless it's some huge infrastructure project. But stuff like you were just talking about, the non-custodial sentences where you could have people, really throw it, and simultaneously throwing something back into the community, it would be visual, it would still feel punishing. If you were the aforementioned, city trader that used to, wine and dine in the finest restaurants, and there you are picking litter from the side roads and the lay-bys of the country's streets and motorways and the like. If you would, there would still be a sense of punishment to that, but I would imagine it would require some real thinking on this to make it happen. You couldn't just say, oh, well, here's some overalls, off you go, sunshine, and don't worry, Alf with a clipboard is going to monitor you. It's got to be bigger than that. and I guess governments either ran out of ideas or just didn't have the time, and maybe the civil service didn't help. Who knows? But no one, as far as I can recall, has ever really tried this.
No, actually, Ian, interestingly, that's not quite right. We used to have quite a lot of what we called, not very happily called, community service.
Yeah, I remember that.
These are the sorts of things, the more constructive things, punishment in the community, making people give things back to the community, proper rehabilitative work. So if someone is offending, not because they are essentially an offender, but because they are just hopeless at coping with their own lives and they drift into crime, we ought to have programs for people like that. Maybe they need to do a little bit of time as well, but it's no good putting them inside, letting them out, setting them up to fail, and back inside they go again, and then moaning that our prisons are full.
Yeah. Have you ever felt that we were near to sort of seismic change? We've got Andy Burnham, who's promising seismic change in lots of areas. He's even moved to Manchester today for 24 hours only, but he apparently is going to do this every single week. And he's trying to suggest that we need to change the way we do government. That seems to have been his sort of mantra in the. I mean, he wasn't even an MP a little while ago, but he's now the Prime Minister. It needs that kind of thinking, doesn't it? Big thinking. But did you ever encounter a moment when you thought we were maybe getting close to that, or that there was a person out there, you can name them or not name them, it's up to you, that was on it, that got it? A Justice Secretary, a Home Secretary that was really on side? Yeah,
I mean, I think there have been people who have got it. I think David Gauke got it. The trouble is that there are so many crises going on in our community, and we've stopped, as you said, Ian, we've stopped planning. We've stopped looking at the bigger picture. Governments just they react to the next crisis. So 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when we first started letting people out really early, we were told it's a one-off thing. This is going to solve the prison problem. And it did for 6 months. And then we were told, we're only going to let non-violent offenders out early, non-sexual offenders out early, so everything's okay. And we stuck with that for 18 months before we suddenly said, well, you know what, we're just going to have to reduce the percentage for more people. And it's all because we're locking up too many people for the amount of space that we've got. Yeah. And the answer isn't to keep fiddling with the figures, it's to sort out the underlying problem. Yeah, we will always be. I can see us in 2 years' time having this same conversation, Wendy. It seems to be sort of how it works. A word, if you would, before we go, Wendy. Alex Ruda-Cabana, the Southport killer, now been transferred from a standard prison to Broadmoor Psychiatric Hospital. I mean, in many respects, no surprise there. This does happen from time to time. Yeah, it happens. It happens surprisingly often, and it's a perfectly legal procedure. There is a provision in the Mental Health Act. It's a thing called Section 47, but it doesn't matter what it's called. Which, when two psychiatrists who are appropriately qualified to deal with this sort of problem, certify that he actually cannot be treated and properly dealt with within prison system, a prisoner is sent off to a psychiatric unit and is treated. You can't force treatment on a prisoner in a prison. You can compel them to have treatment in a psychiatric hospital against their will. So he will be treated for whatever it is that the psychiatrists have said ails him. I don't know what it is, but they've obviously said something, and then he will be sent back to prison again. When we hear victims' families, who naturally this is such a disturbing, horrific story for all the reasons we are aware of, suggesting that somebody like Ruda-Cabana could have tricked his way into Broadmoor. I know this isn't, you're not a psychiatrist, you're a judge, but do you think that would even be possible, that a prisoner could fake
the severity of their psychological condition?
Well, I suppose it's possible. Anything's possible. But two psychiatrists have to certify it as well. And if I'm honest, Ian, I certainly wouldn't want to con my way into prison, but I wouldn't want to con my way into Broadmoor either.
Yeah.
You know, he's going to be forced to have treatment there. It's quite plain that they were unable to cope with his behaviour in prison. One of the reasons, one of the things that can justify the transfer is not only that there has to be a mental health disorder of a particular nature and degree, but it has to be that it threatens the health or safety of the prisoner or the safety of other people. And I think I think what is being said is he was compromising the safety of those who have the care of him.
Wendy, on that point, thank you as ever. Always thorough stuff. Have a lovely weekend. Wendy Joseph, KC, former criminal judge at the Old Bailey. And I mean, the last point that we were discussing there, of course, is that news has only broken in the last half day or so. The other area we were talking about there, she said it herself. You know, there are times when you think, why is there not a more robust community, they call it community payback at one point, community service, something that's more robust than that. So it's not from what I can gather, the last time they sort of tried this, a few people had to wear some kind of high-vis vests and go out onto lay-bys with a litter-picking stick and pick up manky, discarded McDonald's packets and the like. And those looking after them, there wasn't a sense that anything much was happening. And after about an hour, they went, yeah, all right, you can go home now. OK, bit weird. It didn't feel like this was a recognised pun. It was almost like a bit of a stopgap, some kind of experiment. I just can't help but think if you got people to work in appropriate areas, those that are non-violent, not a threat to society, there's no sense of that, that has to be not just, and I don't say this in order just to solve the current problem with the prison crisis. It would do that, but this should be something we're doing anyway, right? Something that makes more sense, isn't as expensive, and does the job, not just a punishment, a level of rehabilitation. You know, you get people who, you hear this time and time again, you throw somebody into a voluntary department where you're doing work that might be, you know, the obvious example is down at the old folks' home, carrying shopping or painting windows, whatever it happens to be. That does something to people's head. You'd have to be some kind of hard-assed such and such not to experience the positive effect of putting something back. Won't be good for everybody. So there's that. There's the punishment side, because you've already lost your job. You can't go back to your job under this scheme, or under the notional idea of this scheme. But there'd be loads of stuff you could get people doing, but no one's ever seriously gone for it. Why not? Surely it's the answer. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
A 78-year-old Anne Widdecombe was bashed on the head repeatedly with a hammer until she died. Palestine Action is advertising direct action training using hammers.
And I'm sorry, but this is what happens when you import not just sort of, frankly, foreign or very un-British sort of cultural issues like Palestine, but when you actually tolerate the behaviour as well. Everybody knows that struggle is typified by brutal violence. We don't want that here.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Annie says, so if early release reoffends, do they go to jail or are they still too full? It's a good point. It's a good point. And I guess there are certain crimes where there are habitual criminals. The difficulty is, and I remember going around in the capacity of this job, I haven't done this for a while, but being in a couple of prison visits and shown round by a governor and stuff. And a guy saying to me, a governor saying to me, I can't remember whether this was on the Isle of Sheppey or whether it was Maidstone prison, but either way, the point was this. He said, you go to the lifers wing and you don't really get any hassle from that wing. You don't get any trouble. They're there forever, and oddly, it's actually quite calm. Even that horrible wing with sex offenders on, he said, you rarely get any trouble. He said, but over there, that wing there, he said, it's a horror show over there. He said, they're the oiks that are in and out like a robber's dog. They go, they come, they'll nick your car, they'll set fire to your garden. They're that group. They're sort of antisocial, scroty, kind of horrendous, animal-like, subhuman characters that exist among us. That group. Now, I don't know whether that group would be... That would be seen as violent, so they wouldn't necessarily qualify. But there's loads of people that are in jail for, often for stupidity as much as anything else. And I'm also aware that just because somebody works... I gave the example of a city trader that does, something wrong. It shouldn't be seen as, the privileged don't go to jail, but the oiks do. It shouldn't... We don't want that system in place. There are plenty of both that should not be in jail, and there's plenty of both that should be in jail. But it's got to be crime-specific. You've also got to look at the previous of somebody. If they've committed crime after crime after crime, is there any point in getting them painting the walls of the old people's home? I doubt it. Let's go back to the calls. Chris is in Surrey, number 10 North. What are you thinking, Chris? I mean, you're in leafy Surrey. What do you care?
Well, actually, I'm in Altea in Spain currently, but yes,
well, okay.
I do
maybe he'll open one there as well. Who knows, Chris?
Yeah, well, you never know, mate. No, it's nonsense, isn't it? He's vacuous, an empty vessel. He doesn't know what to say next. But, they're saying, I think Alex said earlier that the cost is reckoned to be around 850 million.
That's all.
Well, if the government come up with those figures, Ian, you can guarantee it will be 3 or 4 times that amount.
Of course.
All those people that live in the constituencies in outlying parts of the east, the west, the north, Newcastle, etc. They've got pads in London or hotels in London for when they come down to Parliament.
Yep.
They're going to need the same in Manchester. That's going to cost billions. It's going to, the sheer logistics of getting someone from Cornwall to Manchester, the only way is to fly them, because otherwise they've got to go into London to get the train on to Manchester, I would imagine. No, he's got this great idea that he's going to turn the north into some, amazing paradise. It's be like a pheasant rising from the ashes. It's nonsense.
It's kind of, the symbolism, if you say to somebody, should every part of the UK be equally represented, then the answer is obviously yes. But I think reasonably suggest, Chris, that it sort of already is, right? I'm not aware that there's a different law in Surrey than there is in Scunthorpe. I think that all the same rules apply.
Yeah, I don't feel any connection to London any more than someone who lives in Newcastle.
Correct.
That's exactly the point. I struggle greatly with local problems and MPs that don't really care and corrupt. Corruption's everywhere, mate. But it's not going to go anywhere. But my main point, really, if you got time, is about the prisons.
Yeah.
Now, in construction, there's a product out there made by a company I've worked with that can build 3 or 4 story dwellings, hotels, schools, you name it, out of timber, well insulated, secure, comfortable, all the amenities. We build some of them, we make them secure with barbed wire, moats full of crocodiles or piranha, I don't care, but we'll make it secure. We'll do risk assessments, that's what they're called. When you do something in construction, you make sure that you're not going to injure yourself or anyone else and it gets passed. We do it with the prisoners, the people you're talking about, mate, the blue-collar, the white-collar criminals, the low-risk. Let them serve out the rest of their sentence after they've done their half or whatever it is the government insists they do, you know, or the 40%, I don't know. But not just that. We'll attach to it training centres where they can go in, they can learn a trade in the construction industry, in the food industry, in the pub industry. We could even teach them to be radio presenters, mate, couldn't we?
Well, we need a few of those, that's for sure.
We need a few good ones, don't we?
Yeah.
They're all on your channel at the moment.
It would. Well, that's good to hear. I do like the idea of having Scrotebag McDougall presenting breakfast for a week. You know,
well,
it's quite a nice idea.
Risk ones, yeah.
How you doing? How you doing, UK? Welcome. Top tips coming up at 8:30. How to break into your neighbour's house. There'd be something in there. You mentioned this about quick building or fast track building.
Yeah.
What sort
it
of...
can be done in months.
You see, I've always wondered that. You know these, I mean, you're sort of talking about a prefab type model?
It's all prefabricated.
Yeah.
You could use porter cabins, Ian. They can be specially made. The company that makes porter cabins is actually called Porter Cabin, but they make all sorts of other products. They can build them. I don't know off the top of my head what the cost would be, but, you know, once you've built these centres, we've got all these illegals coming over on boats.
I refuse to believe this can't be. I mean, it seems ridiculous. I know that everyone's got these kind of examples. I was walking the dog, it's about a year ago now, but I was walking the dog, and there's this, like, gap between 2 houses where they'd laid these the foundations had been there for months, and I thought, is anyone ever going to build on that thing? And the next day I went back, there was a house there, and I thought, how did that happen? And then I realised how it happened. It was obviously the prefab thing, and, you know, by that stage I clocked the vans up the road. I think it was a German company that had come over and done it, but nonetheless, whoever it was, this thing was... And I thought, it's a full-blown house. I mean, I'm sure there's still a bit more to be done inside, but the point being is the one you're making, Chris. It cannot be beyond the wit of mankind in the 21st century to build a flipping prison, or the equivalent of.
No, you're absolutely right, mate. It can be done, should be done, but it needs the will and it needs the money and it needs the resources. I'm sitting around now, retired. I could contribute. I've been training people for years through my own company, you know, to go out on site and do plastering, dry lining, whatever.
Nice.
And it doesn't take more than a couple of years to get them to that stage. But it can all be done in modules. I've designed them and everything. It's all there, and I'm sure there's plenty of other people who can do the same for chefs, you know, for carpenters, for bricklayers, for electricians. It's all there. The people need labour.
Yep.
You know, I think we had the conversation the other day about people on welfare being paid to do nothing, didn't we? All right.
Yeah.
You read my message. Why? You know, get them into work. Give them tax breaks for 2 years. Say, look, you don't pay any tax. Get into work. Let the employer have them you know, no national insurance contributions for now. Get them working. Give them a career path, even a profession. And maybe in a couple of years they'll have got used to the idea of doing a bit of graft and they'll pay their way.
I mean, you wonder about the kind of common sense element of... I mean, what you've just said makes perfect sense. What I said at the beginning, lots of people chiming in on that, saying it makes perfect sense. So where's the disconnect, I wonder, between logic and things that people like you and me and pretty much everyone listening to this are coming up with, and the government? These ideas must come up around the table, Chris. You know, we can't be the first to have this conversation.
Well, no one in government, despite being asked, has ever wanted my opinion. I've tried to put my case across many, many times, but they're not interested, mate. And it's political mindset, and the socialists, the communists, the left, whatever you call them, they have the worst. You know, they're so dogmatic. They are. It's ingrained in them. They can't think outside that box.
Sure.
and the Tories are in on the opposite side, but with the same entrenched attitude.
Well, it's exactly that. This kind of groupthink, status quo thinking that kind of wrecked the place, frankly, and I can't see any sign of it getting better. Chris, I've got to run, but that's brilliant. Enjoy the rest of the day. Obviously in hotter, well, it's fairly hot here, but clearly hotter there in Spain. Thank you to Chris, originally from Surrey. Good point. This one comes in from Zarina, who says, Ian, I would like to see suited and booted prisoners doing some good. There are many schools in this country that need painting or some form of DIY that is unaffordable for the school. It would be great to use the summer holidays to bring in prisoners to decorate, give back, learn new skills. Yeah, all of that. Somebody would simply say, putting this together would require... You know, you've got the Home Office, and the Home Office was just too big, and it did too many things. So a few years back now, a lot of years back, they splintered off the Department for Justice, and that began a whole new department. And it would be argued that you'd need another new department to cope with that. Well, in which case, make a new department. If we can prove that the numbers show that this is not only cheaper overall in terms of everyday costs of the penal system, so custodial versus non-custodial, the latter being infinitely cheaper, the way, every step of the way. But, more to the point, it actually does some good, then what's wrong with that? 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is indeed Talk. 0344 499 1000. Mark in Staffordshire says, afternoon, Ian. The backbenchers won't be going to number 10 North until it's called Vaychester. Regards from Mark. It's a good point. I do kind of wonder sometimes what that leaves in terms of backbenchers, because, of course, you know, it's not everybody's constituency. There's lots of northern MPs that will go, well, I don't want to be in Manchester. I want to be in my own backyard. Most MPs do go to their constituencies, usually Thursday evening. They're off, and then they do all their constituency stuff over the course of a weekend, whatever that is, the local fete, eating lots of Christmas dinners around December time, opening up the new library, whatever it happens to be, and their surgeries and stuff. So they're already doing that all over the country. So where's the lack of representation? Pav's in Harrow. Pav, what have you got for us? Back to the issue of prisons. Hi.
Good afternoon, Ian.
Afternoon.
I think it's too simplistic when people are just going to come out and say, for example, yes, we should just have more prisons built, or we should, on the flip side, just rehabilitate everybody. If you bear with me, I've got some facts and figures for you which may assist in that. But I will preface it by saying that the problem that I think that ultimately will ensure that this doesn't get resolved is even if the government continue their pledge to keep putting money into these things, there's no point putting, extra bath water into a bath if a plug hole hasn't got a plug in it.
Fair.
So, they're putting, the figures which were given were they're going to introduce £4.7 billion of extra revenue that are coming into prisons to try to make them better. And this is off the back of the fact that the Leicester prison, Glen Parva, which was built back in 2023, 3 years after the original target, cost some £280-odd million a year for about 1,700 prisoners. So if you upload that now, we can say probably looking about 350, 400 million for a new prison. But of course, the problem with that is a lot of the older prisons are in a state of disrepair. We've got that prison that you may remember in January, I think it was in Dartmoor, which is empty, still costing the taxpayer £4 million a year up until the end of the lease. Now, people may say, well, it's only 50, 60 million. But the point is, once you start allowing stuff like that to continue unabated and without looking, you're expending the resources, which we all know are finite. But here's the other problem here. With regard, you addressed this with somebody who rang earlier. With regards to the first aspect, that for me, that the big issue that we need to talk about is approximately the 11,000 foreign prisoners that are in our jails. What do we do with them? Do we turn around and put an instant deportation order on to say, right, you're foreign, you've been convicted, you can go to wherever you come from, whatever? That would obviously take away any human rights issues that we have in terms of once their sentence has finished, i.e., whether they were potentially in danger of their country of origin or whatever. Or do we turn around and ask judges to say, right, well, at the end of their sentence, for example, whatever it is, that there's a deportation order put there. I'm happy to go either way depending on what people want to do. But that's certainly one thing. And you spoke about Albanians. Still, the statistic is there. 1 in 6 approximately of foreign prisoners, so those born outside the British Isles, are of Albanian descent. That's just fact. That's not racism. That's nothing else. That's just fact. How do you address, statistics like that? Again, that's a moot point. But the other aspect that I think is important, which people often forget, is there is this aspect, and there are plenty of studies around which show that between 1 in 4 and 1 in 5 people, once they are given the option of some sort of education in prison, tend not to reoffend. So that's definitely something we need to look at, because whatever we say about anything else, when we look at some of the social backgrounds of some of these people, I'm not trying to be disparaging or haughty here. It's a fact that, they do lack basic education, which many of us take for granted. And, like I said, studies have shown that between 1 in 4 and 1 in 5 people don't tend to reoffend. So that's something we need to explore. But I would take that a step further. And I would really look to expand those resources in Youth Offenders Institute, and particularly those who may otherwise become either radicalized or become serious criminals whilst in prison, because that's often the things they lack. Whether or not it's like you have, I think it's the famous shoe company, I won't mention their name, that obviously take on people who have that background. So again, those are schemes that we need to look at. But I think that what I'm trying to say in a nutshell is, you need to have a situation where there's a broad-brushed approach to this. You can't have the populists either on the left who want to essentially have open borders and allow everybody else just to waltz on in and without any repercussions. But equally, I don't think it's the idea to say that we need to have just simply more prisons built, because, of course, if we have more prisons built, the tendency with people coming, especially from abroad, is there'll be a greater number of them as well who are put up. And all in all, and in a nutshell, in finality, I will say that the other aspect of it is that the early release scheme that Burnham and Co. are looking at, the fact remains that part of that and his predecessors were because we don't have enough prison places. That's something the judicial system and indeed the government have to look at and tackle. But I think most people would agree with the consensus that once you get a prison sentence, particularly for a heavier crime or a more serious crime, shall I say, then you should and have to serve it. This idea that you'll let out is frankly an insult to victims, it's an insult to the criminal system, and it's an insult to all of us who try to live our lives in a normal way.
It's a great point, Pav. Lovely to have you on as ever. Thank you, Pav in Harrow. This one in from Bernie in Warwickshire. I have to pay monthly for spending the government's money on a degree. Why don't prisoners have to do the same of repayment? Then the money can go to new prisons. Have I got this wrong? Were they building a stonking big prison somewhere? This goes back a couple of years. Or did it open? We keep saying, why don't they just build one? I mean, by the time we've been talking about this for yonks, I'm sure there was one. It was either half built or being built, or somebody was thinking about building it. I don't know what happened to it. Maybe I just dreamt this whole thing. Brad in Cambridge says, I want independency for Cambridgeshire, please, Ian. I'm sick of the North getting all the goodies. It's a fair point, and they're exactly the arguments that will flow from this one. Chris in Ottershaw says, afternoon, when it comes to the overcrowding of prisons, I have a solution for the government. Emulate your illegal migrant policy of one in, one out. Yeah, that would be an answer. Don in Chelmsford says, I suppose it's a coincidence that Andy Burnham spends Friday in Manchester. Couldn't be a long weekend. I can hear the Thunderbirds theme as he lands in Manchester. I think there's some of that too. This one comes from Dead as a Dodo on Twitter or on X. Says, devolution isn't Burnham's plan. He is following a European Union plan, followed by John Prescott. We are sleepwalking back into the EU. I haven't heard anybody say, I'm aware of the plan you're talking about, which was to have kind of regional governments, basically. But I haven't heard that floated in the latest developments with Burnham. But it's quite right. There was that idea that you just chunk everything off into regions. So, yes, you have countries, but then you have acknowledged regions, as in almost green-lit by the EU. Whether you're in France, Germany, Spain. I don't know how far that ever went. Lenny in Ashford says, I believe Burnham pays little detail to taxpayers' money. His record speaks for itself. You have to take into account number 10 Downing Street is the headquarters of our government, with an office block full of civil servants for any information available. I mean, it is literally the head office. There's not many jobs you would get if you were the chairman of, I don't know, a big company. I mean, you might be able to take a unilateral decision to close down your headquarters, but generally speaking, I don't think you'd go, I'm not working here anymore, I'm going to build a new building in a different part of the country, because I quite like it in Hampshire, wherever. That would seem odd too. Matthew's in Warrington. What have you got, Matthew, for us? You're in the neck of the woods that is firmly described as the North. Are you feeling like a new man today?
No, it's Friday, mate. I'm clean crackered.
Get that.
I'm glad you're better as well, mate, after your bout of man flu.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what it was. Lots of people have got it. I tell you what, I'm not 100%, though. You know when something lurks around and you think, yeah. I normally look forward to a Friday night beer. That's not on my menu at the moment.
The thing is, though, our good ladies don't understand our pain when we get the man flu, do they?
Absolutely right. Worse than childbirth.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, no, mate, Burnham, he's gaslighting us gaslighting us over this back in Manchester on a Friday. He just wants a 4-day week, typical union socialist. He's back home. He's got his Tetley's bitter there. He's sat at home watching rugby league. Didn't Starmer turn around and say that when he got into office that he's not going to work on a Friday because it's his family day? What's up with these people?
He did say that, didn't he? Yeah,
he did. Yeah, he said he's not going to work on a Friday.
I wonder what did he ever? Was it past 6 p.m. or something? He said he wouldn't work, and I wonder if he ever kept to that.
Well, I don't know. I reckon he did because he was useless. Maybe if he put a bit more effort into being the Prime Minister, he'd still be in the job.
It's almost like he's forgotten already, isn't it?
Yeah, but let's be honest about it. Manchester, do we really want all of London coming up to Manchester once a week and mithering, and it doesn't make sense. He's not distributing anything, is he? He just basically doesn't want to be. He sees himself as a northern lad. He's playing that card to get the northern vote. Oh, good old Andy. He's a prime minister. Get a suit on, get into 10 Downing Street and do the job. I mean, never mind giving us 43 quid off anything. Never mind just taking £1,000 off business rates. Get down there and let's sort the country out, which I don't think he's going to be able to do.
Indeed. Got it, Matthew. Great call. Have a great weekend, Matthew. Thank you for that, Matthew, in Warrington. I mean, when you think about it, we're sort of... This Number 10 North thing, people are talking about it. It's in the news. It's his first day there. Never really been done before. The PM's going to work from a different place once a week where he can. But there's going to be a serious point when we go, what's the tangible manifestation of that? Other than the visuals, other than to say, oh, look, the Prime Minister isn't questioning, you know, that there's other parts of the country that exist. He's fully aware of it because he works there once. So, I mean, are we all that stupid? I mean, does it need that? I don't think when different Prime Ministers go in, I mean, Rishi Sunak, was he Southampton MP, isn't he? I was just talking about Hampshire. I mean, I don't think that Rishi Sunak becoming... He didn't forget Southampton. He also didn't think that Southampton deserved any special status because that's where he represented. And different MPs that have come from different places and got into high cabinet roles as well. I don't know what it's going to mean. I genuinely can't work out what is going to be the upshot of all of this 2 years down the line. 0344 499 1000. Great calls and comments on the way. A brand new Voice of Doom coming in just a couple of moments' time. It's 10 to 3 almost. This is Talk.
A 78-year-old Anne Widdecombe was bashed on the head repeatedly with a hammer until she died. Palestine Action is advertising direct action training using hammers.
And I'm sorry, but this is what happens when you import not just sort of, frankly, foreign or very un-British sort of cultural issues like Palestine, but when you actually tolerate the behaviour as well. Everybody knows that struggle is typified by brutal violence. We don't want that here.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
One in from Keith, who says the obvious place for overcrowded prisons at one time would possibly have been disused army barracks, possibly for the housing of non-violent crimes, etc. Obviously, security would have to be beefed up. Sadly, the same said barracks are now being taken over by illegal immigrants. Incidentally, I'm sure some people will find a human rights loophole that presents prisoners working in the community. Yes, somebody absolutely will. They will explain that it is somehow breaching something or other. There has to be a better way. And if Andy Burnham is talking about thinking big and thinking outside the box and doing stuff that for 40 years governments have never done, then think big on this one, Mr. Burnham, because it's crucial. It wouldn't just be a gimmick, like, I don't know, for example, setting up an office in Manchester for once a week at the cost of hundreds of millions. It wouldn't be that. It would be genuine. Our penal system needs addressing. Jails are crowded and in many, many cases, they simply don't work. They're also hugely expensive. We mentioned the army in that last mention. What about this? Only 6% of Brits would take up arms to defend the UK. What would you do if there was an imminent invasion? Would you be prepared to say, if the posters went up, your country needs you, the ads were on the TV, Bill Nighy voicing the ad to try and recruit people, would you do it? Would you give it a go? Let's speak with Andrew Fox, Senior Associate Fellow at the Henry Jackson Society, former Major in the Parachute Regiment, knows his way around the military. Andrew, good afternoon to you. 6%, did that surprise you?
Yes and no. Yes and no. And I think if we just stop for a second and think about the age range of people that we're talking about here, we're talking about people 18 years old and upwards, which means they were born sort of after 2005, before 2010. And in their short lives, they've experienced a global financial crash. Yeah. They've experienced COVID, the economic turmoil that came from Brexit. They've grown up through an education system that tells them nothing but the UK is bad and we're colonialist and the empire was awful and our history is something to be ashamed of. They've seen the social demographics of this country change beyond recognition in an incredibly short space of time as we've moved from a high trust society to a low trust society since the turn of the millennium. And actually, I have a degree of sympathy with them if they say that they wouldn't stand and fight, because frankly, they've spent their entire lives seeing very little worth fighting for, and I do have some genuine sympathy with that position.
Yeah, I think when you see our country so badly managed by our political masters at Westminster and doing things that nobody ever voted for and allowing things to happen that nobody ever voted for presiding over policy that has no support anywhere where you look, you never meet anybody that says, oh yeah, I love those boats coming over the channel, it's a fantastic idea. Things like that, you can understand why people aren't really feeling the loyalty vibe.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, if I think back to what it was like when I joined, we knew we were going to Iraq or Afghanistan. Recruiting was really good because people actually wanted to go and fight in those wars, believe it or not. We actually recruited very, very handsomely, particularly during the early part of the 2000s. And we knew what we were fighting for. And I think in hindsight, we dragged those wars out. We ended up spending 20 years in Afghanistan to hand the whole country back to the Taliban. Iraq was a pretty futile conflict as well that ended in a really shameful withdrawal and a retreat and a defeat for the British Army in Basra. And if that's your only experience of war, then if you're growing up in that era, it's going to quite understandably put you off fighting. I grew up during the era of the Falklands conflict, of the Gulf War, of Bosnia. These were good, solid military achievements. We had an army that was winning, and you wanted to be part of that, and you wanted to be out there and represent your country on the world stage almost, and try and be a force for good in the world. Whereas if you've seen only Iraq and Afghanistan, and that's your frame of context for the British Army and for conflict more generally, I can see how that would alienate you.
There is some support, though, in terms of what we should be doing in terms of the military. 57% believe the government is spending too little on defence. Only 6% disagreed with that question. Now, of course, we have a new Chancellor, we have a new Defence Secretary, we'll come to him in a second. But the Chancellor, John Healey, this is the man that was the former Defence Secretary. He wanted more money, now he's the man in charge of the money. So this should be a win-win in some respects.
Yeah, or indeed a lose-lose, and that's the sort of the barrel. That's the barrel that Mr. Healey now finds himself over, because he found the shortfall in defence enough to resign over, and now he is the man who is literally in charge of fixing that shortfall. And if he can't do it, then it does make his resignation look somewhat hollow. Yeah. And so he's in danger of looking slightly hypocritical if he does not now pony up the money needed for defence. And look, I think more broadly though, the government needs to make a better case for why it's needed.
Correct.
Yes, we all know about Ukraine, we all know about Russia, but actually, if you look at the Strait of Hormuz or even the Bab el-Mandeb, the Red Sea, which is potentially, under threat now from the Houthis in Yemen, like that affects how much British people pay at the supermarket for basic goods. It affects how much you pay at the petrol pump. Defence is intimately linked to prosperity. If you don't have a strong defence, you cannot have, a wealthy country and keep prices down. We're going to see a global inflationary shock from the Middle East, and we have no ability to do anything about it. And so that's how I think you sell defence to people. There is no prosperity in the United Kingdom without solid defences, and that's the way I think we need to shape this conversation.
Final question. Wes Streeting is the new Defence Secretary. Your thoughts?
Well, I think if you check today's Telegraph, you'll see a fairly strident view from my position. Look, the guy's been in for 2 days and he's already starting to spread blood libels about Israel. And the real danger here is that if you look at urban warfare in Gaza and you don't understand what you're seeing, when British troops have to go to those sorts of environments and fight in an urban conflict, you're setting our own troops up for the same false allegations that are being thrown at Israel. You know, this guy seems to me to be completely out of his depth. I don't think you need military experience to be the Defence Secretary. You know, I appreciate the previous one was a former parachute regiment major, and you might think that would make me entirely in favour of former parachute regiment majors being Defence Secretary. But actually, you know, what you need is a level head, the ability to think coolly, the ability to run a multi-billion-dollar, effectively, industry and company. And at the moment, Wes Streeting seems to be more concerned with political posturing because he nearly lost his own seat to a Gaza independent. And I think that is an incredibly dangerous place for us to be in such an uncertain world. We need a strong, capable Defence Secretary that thinks much more bigger than his own personal politics.
On that point, great to have you on, Andrew. Thank you. Powerful stuff. Andrew Fox, former major in the Parachute Regiment. He's also Senior Associate Fellow at the Henry Jackson Society. Thank you to him. Right, we've got a brand new voice of doom. I mentioned this before the news. This is the mystery voice, but it's always political. Somebody who is either a politician, linked to politics, dead or alive, left-wing, right-wing, you name it. The question is, very simply, who is this?
The men and the women fight.
Let's hear that again.
The men and the women fight.
And again.
The men and the women fight.
Now, if you think you know who that is, very simply, 87222, 87222. Every time I say I think this is a real difficult one, somebody gets it on day one. Here it is again.
The men and the women fight.
The men and the women fight. Those words are from who? 87222. If we get a correct answer, naturally, we will tell you who it is in the next hour. If we don't, it rolls over to Monday on the programme. Here it is again.
The men and the women fight.
87222. This comes from Gary in East Malling. Deport foreign prisoners back to their country of origin. That country won't want them or the cost of imprisoning them and let them free, knowing they'll be on the first rubber dinghy back here. Then rather than being in an in a prison, they'll be in an HMP, they'll be in an HMO. I like the rhythmic way that was framed. I didn't do it full justice there for a second, Gary. Thank you for that. And this one says, your previous caller talked about using convicts to do maintenance work on schools. That means less work for honest trades that are already struggling. That's a fair point too, but there are some places that aren't even using honest trades, I suppose, or any trades at the moment. 0344 499 1000. Let's get the news headlines now. The time, 3 o'clock.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Welcome back. Home of Common Sense. Just gone 3 o'clock. Loads to get through. We are naturally majoring on Andy Burnham, day one in the new Downing Street. Never happened before, this one. This one's in Manchester. It's called Number 10 North. He reckons he's going to work there once a week. It's a logistical nightmare. It's incredibly expensive. What does it actually mean? Yes, the symbolism. Look, I'm all over the country. Look, well, I'm actually near my own constituency, so it's rather handy for him. He's only got to get on one of his new £2 buses, and he's back home. So, happy days, trebles all round for the Prime Minister. Serious question. What does it mean in the grander scale of things? What is, quite literally, the point? We'll have more calls and comments on that. The new Prime Minister has also been forced to halt the early release of prisoners. You've seen this story emerge over the last couple of days. We focused a lot on it. But what are the alternatives to prison? Is that surely there must be. It's the 21st century. It's the year 2026. Are we seriously saying that it's beyond the wit of mankind to solve a problem of overcrowding? That seems to be quite literally where we are at. And the weather gets an airing, of course, because the first drought has been declared. The first drought, there's no trouts because there's a drought, has been declared in parts of Wales after record-breaking heat waves. We've got a hosepipe ban for 23 million households. Your grass is probably looking like the Gobi Desert right now. And there's wildfires raging from North Wales to the Cairngorms. So it's a bit of a grim picture in the weather. On the plus side, it's warm and sunny, so happy days. 0344 499 1000 is where you will find us. You can message 87222. We've got a load of stuff to get through here, including this is another aspect of what Andy Burnham has been talking about, North Sea drilling. Apparently it's back on the agenda with approvals for Rosebank and Jackdaw expected within weeks and production potentially beginning in October. What's not to like? Rupert Darwell is the author of Green Tyranny. Good to have you on with us, Rupert. I don't know what it is about this story, but something isn't quite sitting right in my head. I'm looking at all the characters that are involved in this government. Obviously, there's Andy Burnham. He's a little unknown in the Green territory because he's not been in national power for a long time. But we've still got Ed Miliband knocking around the place. We've got still a fully fledged department dealing with net zero with what looks like an equally evangelical, if not more evangelical, energy minister on the case. And yet Mr Burnham is going, we're going to drill, baby, drill. Why am I suspicious about this, Rupert? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you, Ian. Well, I think it's politics, isn't it? One interpretation is he's gearing up for an election, and he doesn't want an unpopular policy causing a problem in an autumn campaign. I mean, that's one interpretation. But fundamentally, it shows the politics of net zero have really shifted. This is not a popular policy. They've had to take VAT off electricity bills because renewables and the net zero policy have been pushing electricity costs up. So it's about clearing the decks. I think for the autumn. Sorry, that's like my dog just barking.
That's all right. So in terms of so there is a potential, and I'd not really thought about it like that, but it's a very good point. He wants to make sure he's speaking to all galleries, I guess, on all issues, and this one does tick a big one. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Let's say that he's actually completely enamoured and won over by the idea that we don't need to be monkeying around with windmills when we've got this stuff on our own doorstep, oil we already own, it's underneath us, it's all over. The options are actually even far bigger than just Jackdaw and Rosebank. There's all sorts of other areas we could look at. Could it be that then? Could we be going back to some, genuine, proper fuel and energy for this country?
Well, Andy Burnham and the government are trapped by the Climate Change Act 2008 and by Theresa May's last act as Prime Minister, which was to push net zero through, to put net zero at the centrepiece of the Climate Change Act, which gives the government a legal duty to enact policies to achieve net zero. And there is no way that the Labour Party can escape from that legal duty. There is no way, because the only way you can do it is to effectively repeal the Climate Change Act, and that is not going to happen under this government. It will only happen as a result of opposition parties winning the next election and then repealing the act. So they are actually trapped. This is deck chairs stuff. I mean, it's great that Rosebank and Jackdaw are going to be approved, but I wouldn't. It's not going to get. This is not a fundamental change in policy. It's really about, in my view, it's about the optics of. It's about optics and politics, not about a fundamental policy change.
But of course, you'd think if you were Ed Miliband, you would just leave the government, wouldn't you, on this point? I mean, I thought when they announced a third runway, surely this is the point where evangelical Ed is going to say, I can't be part of a government that does this. I've spent the last God knows how many years telling everybody it's the most evil idea in the world. But maybe the seduction of a nice car and that red box was all too much. And he didn't. He stayed. Now, he's got a different role now, but you'd still think, if you're Ed Miliband, this goes against the absolute essence of the government he thought he was serving, and yet he's still in the job.
Yeah, that's true, but he's not in the job that he really wanted, which was Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Yeah.
And the reason he didn't get that job is because of net zero and his as you call it, the evangelical zeal with which he pursued net zero. If he had been more pragmatic, he would now be in number 11, being Chancellor of the Exchequer and the second most powerful person in the government, instead of which it's John Healey. So, yes, and he's not, as you said, he's not going to quit being Foreign Secretary. It's one, it's a lovely job, lots of travel, meet lots of interesting people.
Yeah.
And you get lovely accommodation as well. You've got chevening to enjoy at the weekend. What's not to love?
You know, I hadn't even correlated that. I mean, that's literally round the corner from where I live. So I've got Ed Miliband as a neighbour.
Well, enjoy good neighbourly relations.
I was looking forward to a nice weekend. He might be. In fact, the pub I was going to go to this evening, originally planned, is the pub that Boris Johnson used to sometimes go to when he was Foreign Secretary. So maybe I'll bump into Ed this very evening. Wouldn't that be something, Rupert?
Yeah, you could have a really good natter about net zero and how it's destroying the country.
Yeah, over a pint and a pickled egg. Who knows? Couple of points on Rosebank and Jackdaw. Yeah. One of the issues with... I mean, what's interesting is that if this was up and running and it worked as it should do, you could have gas supplied to more than 1 million homes this winter. So it could be that quick. It is important, apparently, to say, though, Rupert, that this doesn't necessarily mean cheaper energy bills because, of course, like all oil extraction and gas extraction, these sites are sold on competitive international markets. So they would have to find themselves in that kind of parameter of pricing and cost.
Well, and that's actually not quite... I mean, what you say is true, but the implication, I think, is drawn too far.
Okay.
Domestically produced gas is cheaper than LNG imported from... Well, you can't get gas from Qatar at the moment, but from Texas, across the Atlantic, and there is quite a high cost in liquefying natural gas and then regasifying it when it comes here. So what insofar as it displaces LNG imports, yes, it will make gas cheaper. So there's a game for that, but also it's good for the economy. It's good for energy security. It's also good for tax revenues. There'll be more tax revenues coming to the Treasury. I mean, there are so many benefits from exploiting your own gas and oil reserves.
And just a final point, I did notice that Miata Funbulla, who's the new Energy Secretary, discovered what a protest looks like, because a load of people protested, some Green campaigners outside of her department chanting slogans linking these new projects and the approval or potential approval of them to climate change and recent heat wave deaths. So if you want a good dose of drama and hyperbole, go and watch a Green protest, because these people are literally saying that if we start drilling again, we are going to literally kill people.
Yeah, it's a millennial cult, Ian. That is the. That's what you've got. That's what's being exhibited with these protests, and the idea that if you stop burning fossil fuels, it's a form of salvation. And this isn't science. It's not rational. It's to do it's a form of a secular religion, and the idea of the notion of catastrophe and being saved from catastrophe, salvationism, is absolutely is critically important to what these people believe in. But it's a weird ideology, and once that clicks, a lot of other things fall into place. Once you get that idea.
Absolutely spot on. Rupert, great to have you on. Thank you. Rupert Darwell is the author of Green Tyranny. It looks like a step in the right direction. That little cynical thing in my head that's just rattling around. I hadn't thought of it until Rupert said, is this Andy Burnham, you know, essentially trying to give a nod to every sort of part of the country? Look, I've stopped digital ID. That was almost, I think, before he even became Prime Minister. That was announced a couple of days before. I've paused early prison release, the first Prime Minister that's done that. So there's that. I'm now drilling in the North Sea. He would say, Burnham would go, are you telling me I'm not listening to you? That would be his answer. No, if you put it like that in isolation, you go, what, that's fair? You know, these were all things we've debated for a couple of years on this programme and people have asked for, crying out for. And it's happening under Andy Burnham. Is he doing that because he's a good bloke and he's listened to you, or is he doing that because he's going to call a snap election at some point and wants to make sure he's hoovered up as much support as he can from all sections of the political spectrum? Let's go to Joe in Lancashire. Back to prisons. Joe, what have you got for us? Hi.
Hi, I used to work in the education wing. It's a big Preston prison, not far from here. It's a Cat B, 600 inmates, right?
Okay.
Now, I used to see repeat offenders when I was in there.
I'm sure.
Think about that. Think about prisons, right? 3 meals a day, in the cells, colour, television, a kettle.
Yeah.
Everything's free. Healthcare, glasses, opticians, medication, you name it, all free.
Sure.
State of the art gymnasium. Colour TVs in there. With fully qualified muscle mechanics, physical training instructors, all free. And that's why they come back. I watched a guy on television, a TV presenter, Madeley, the prisons that we see in Europe and abroad, we are too soft, make them tougher, and they won't come back. Give them a strict regime. And they can get paid to work in prison. And I thought, I'm in the wrong job here.
Yeah.
And the best one was this. I'm in the library one morning, and there's a prison officer with lots of newspapers and magazines. He was delivering these to the cells. They buy them, they get delivered to the prison, and they take them to the cells for the prisoners.
They've got a paper boy on C Wing. Extraordinary. Yeah. I mean, I think that is one of the things. You make a great point, Joe, and thank you for that. Mainly because, of course, for some prisoners, going to prison isn't really much of a faff. I mean, it might not be ideal. I mean, there's institutional prisoners that can hardly survive if they're not in prison. There's that. I don't know what percentage that is. But once you're kind of, if you haven't come from a great place and you're not that bothered about the hassle and the jip and the noise on the wing, then yeah, you've got a roof over your head, you're going to be fed, you've got all your kind of needs met. Might be a bit boring sometimes, all right, you can't go to the pub. But once you've got through that general idea, for some, it's kind of more than doable. It's more than doable. 0344 499 1000. Lots more still to come. 3:15, this is Talk.
A 78-year-old Anne Widdecombe was bashed on the head repeatedly with a hammer until she died. Palestine Action is advertising direct action training using hammers.
And I'm sorry, but this is what happens when you import not just sort of, frankly, foreign or very un-British sort of cultural issues like Palestine, but when you actually tolerate the behaviour as well. Everybody knows that struggle is typified by brutal violence. We don't want that here.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, just gone 3:15. You may be familiar with this story, but I want to bring you this because I think it is absolutely worth as much exposure as possible. A 72-year-old, Ryan Cornelius, who was serving time in an Emirati prison. Now, he completed his original 10-year term back in 2018, following a 20-year extension over a debt that the courts in Bahrain say have already been settled. UN experts call his continued detention arbitrary and are demanding his immediate release. How you can get lost in a system in certain parts of the world. Let's speak with Bill Browder, head of the Global Magnitsky Justice Campaign. Afternoon to you, Bill. I mean, on that point, I mean, you're more than aware of what unjust systems look like, and how, you know, governments and overreach into legal areas where they, in a democracy, they would have no place, can play huge parts in this. And we are talking about an area where corruption in the legal and justice system aren't exactly something new.
Well, in the United Arab Emirates, there is no rule of law. It's a rule of men. And in this particular case, it's a rule of men who wanted Ryan Cornelius's property. He was a British property developer who had a very valuable piece of land. He was developing it. And a bunch of people in the United Arab Emirates said, that shouldn't belong to him, that should belong to us. And since they had no legitimate way of getting it, they basically arrested him, put him in solitary confinement, accused him of lots of crimes that he didn't commit, and then sentenced him to 10 years in prison. And as you mentioned, he served those 10 years in prison. And they said, well, you know what? You should serve another 20 years in prison. He's now 72, as you mentioned. They want him to die in prison so that he can't get out and say, this was a stitch up of massive proportions. And what's most awful about the story is that he's a British citizen, and the British government has done absolutely nothing to get him out of prison. Here you have the UN, and I have to say, I'm not a huge fan of the UN. The UN normally doesn't do anything, but here you have the UN speaking in very straight language, saying he should be released. This is unjust, illegal imprisonment. He shouldn't die in prison. And we have the British government who refuses to say anything of that sort. They don't say anything. I'd like to know what Andy Burnham is going to say, because Keir Starmer didn't say anything about this case.
Well, indeed. I mean, it seems extraordinary. And Keir Starmer is a human rights lawyer at his core, of course, which makes it even more mysterious, you might think. We also know that this is a government that has found itself in the midst of all manner of stories of people not being deported because of their dislike of chicken nuggets or goodness knows what, all sorts of unfathomable Article 8 excuses that are thrown in. So if anybody would understand the imperative and the seriousness of someone's human rights, it would be the lot that's in power now, because we've seen evidence of it in the most mysterious way. And yet when you get something that is as unequivocal a miscarriage of justice as this, for it not to be raised with a counterpart or at the UN or in a meeting with a king or a president or something, seems utterly extraordinary. What would your assessment be, Bill, as to why that might be?
It's totally unforgivable. I mean, it's absolutely the British government's duty is to protect a British citizen who's had this terrible injustice. And the British government has chosen not to do that. Why? Because they're afraid that perhaps the Emiratis won't be buying any more horse tracks or whatever, villas in the Scottish Highlands or whatever they're doing. And that cannot be the British government's loyalty should be to its own people, not to some foreign potentate who wants to just lock up British citizens. And this should be the #1 foreign policy priority of our relationship with the UAE. We should say to them, you don't let this guy out, and we can't have normal relations with your country.
Well, you'd think so. I mean, there are arguably other cases that we could talk about, but this is, more high profile and it's come to the public attention. It would be an obvious time for this government, or Keir Starmer's government. That's too late now, but we now have a new government to speak out on these issues. We've got a new Foreign Secretary, Ed Miliband. I'm pretty sure if you asked Ed Miliband a couple of years ago, what do you think of this case, he would say it was an outrage and the British government should be doing something about it. He's now the Foreign Secretary. I would suggest that puts him in it puts him in the territory of having some kind of influence in terms of dialogue.
He should make it his #1 priority with the United Arab Emirates. He should say to them, this man needs to be released. He should publicly say it. He should say it's an injustice, it's an outrage, and Ryan Cornelius should be brought home. And they should be repeating that over and over and over again until the Emiratis let him out of jail. And Andy Burnham should be on the runway to greet Ryan Cornelius when he gets back. That's how a normal country behaves. That's how other countries behave. When Evan Gershkovich, the Wall Street Journal reporter who was falsely imprisoned in Russia, when he was finally released after big pressure from the United States, President Biden was on the runway to greet him. And it basically, if you have a blue British passport and something terrible like this happens to you, so far the British government is a weak and negligent country in looking after its citizens. It's not just this case. There has to be a change in this approach towards British citizens. It's an outrage that Ryan Cornelius is still sitting there.
Yeah, and you're right what you said a moment ago, I think, Bill. It does sort of rather expose perhaps where power really lies, because I'd like to think that the likes of Starmer, Burnham, Miliband and co. that would... not just intellectually, notionally, but within the sphere of their own politics, feel very strongly about this, and yet you can almost hear a man in a grey suit saying, "I'm sorry, Prime Minister, but we need to leave this one alone."
I'm sure that that's the case, and for what it's worth, I mean, it's good politics to be looking after your own citizen.
You'd think.
You would think, and so I hope that this UN very strong statement spurs these people into action, because this man has been sitting there for 18 years. He's 72 years old. His wife has been sitting there without her husband for 18 years, being abandoned by their country. And this is just unacceptable.
It's extraordinary. Bill, always good to speak, and on this issue too, thank you. We appreciate your time. Bill Browder, head of the Global Magnitsky Justice Campaign, on the case of Ryan Cornelius. We did cover this a little while ago on the programme. And this shows, I suppose, the kind of benefits of giving some oxygen to really important stories such as this, because it's very easy to I had to to my shame, actually, I had to remind myself of the story when I began to look at this and thought, yeah, we did cover it. But this kind of stuff should be up there almost on a daily basis. Where was Keir Starmer? Where was his predecessor? Where was Rishi Sunak? Where is Andy Burnham on this? I appreciate he's only been there less than a week. But now Red Ed is the man in charge. You might think collectively, these men... I mean, Starmer was a human rights lawyer, for goodness sake. I would find it extraordinary if Keir Starmer was not aware of this story. If you got Mr Starmer now in a room and said, oh, did you ever, when you were Prime Minister, you familiar with this story? I think that's 100% yes. So what happened? Why did you not make a phone call? Why did you not, at any of those many, many international meetings you went to? You must have crossed paths with some of the Emirati higher lieutenants over the years. Did you never mention this? Was it never discussed once? Was there nobody in the Foreign Office that was doing the work to try and get this guy out of jail? A man that shouldn't have been in jail in the first place? Good Lord. 0344 499 1000. Sandra's in Sunderland, who says, this is reference Burnham, number 10 Manchester, and the like. Sandra says, Ian, I have hope in my heart. Yeah, that's what he told us. Hope in your heart. And what was it in every postcode? Love, joy, a beer. Yeah. Growth in every postcode. That was a hope in your heart, hope in every heart, hope in every postcode. No, hope in every heart, love in every postcode. Growth in every postcode, love in every growth. It was all of those things, in fact. He was promising us everything. And Sandra today is in Sunderland, and of course, if you live in Sunderland, then Manchester is kind of in the Midlands, right? So let's just give that some perspective too. One here from James, who says prison is just hang out these days with PlayStations and TVs. To use your phrase, I'm assuming a free Labrador puppy is waiting for them on release. Yeah. As I was saying a second ago, if you're a kind of, you know, common lag and you're all right for a bit of porridge on Sea-Wing, then, you know, if you've been out nicking cars and, you know, causing some hassle and you've managed to live off the fruits of your crimes, so you're never short of being able to buy a pint and stay up late and never go to work. And, you know, if you need a pair of, you know, new top, just go and nick it because nobody cares. And then you get 6 months and you think, it's all right, I can do that because I've done it 10 times before. I'll get through that, and 6 months will be probably 3, so it's 12 weeks, right? And I'm fed and watered during that time. Should we do the voice of doom? I've got a feeling we might have a winner for this. I've got a feeling we have a winner. It's only day one, remember, and I have to keep repeating this, but it's a mystery voice thing, but it's political, all right? That's the point. It's always a politician or somebody who's obviously linked to politics. Dead or alive, left wing, right wing, somewhere in between. Let's have a listen to the new voice. Here it is.
The men and the women fight.
Who is that? These are some of the guesses. Michael Heseltine. Let's hear it again.
The men and the women fight.
Could be him. But it's not. Chris Eubank. Was it the fight thing that did it? Maybe. Golda Meir, no. Fatima Whitbread, no. Malcolm Rifkin, no. Nelson Mandela, it is not. Michael Howard, Wes Streeting, no and no. Winnie Mandela, no. Kira Rudik, no. Boutros Ghali, no. Mao Zedong, no. Emmanuel Macron, President of France. Let's hear it again, Amy.
The men and the women fight.
It is not. In fact, we do not have a winner. Thank the Lord. Which means it's back on Monday for day 2. Let's have another listen.
The men and the women fight.
You can play that back all weekend. You can make it your ringtone. Take it to the pub. Play it incessantly to the entire Rose and Crown on this lovely summer's evening. Drive people nuts with this voice.
The men and the women fight.
Somebody will know it, all right? We might get an answer on Monday. It's 3:30 right now. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is indeed talk. Yes, good afternoon. Just gone 3:30. What about this story? 2/3 of working-age men admit ignoring symptoms that worried them. This is according to new research, with most saying they put loved ones' health before their own. Well, the actor Will Mellor is urging change after losing his own father to cancer and friends far too young. Good to see you, Will. How are you?
Hi, very well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, good. The last time we spoke was when you just, I think you just done the post office drama at that stage. That was a couple of years ago now, of course. We're onto very different territory here, and whilst the previous was very serious for very different reasons, this is too. And I guess, does this come down to the sort of the classic of blokes? You know, we're always accused of moaning and saying we've got man flu and stuff like that. But when it comes to the really serious stuff, we're actually quite bad as blokes.
Yeah, and I'm one of them people putting things off, burying your head in the sand and, you know, not going to the doctors, even ignoring symptoms that you know you don't feel right, but you'll just go, I'll leave it another week and see how I am then. And
yes,
it's the worst thing you can do, burying your head in the sand. And I actually did a campaign with Burnham Health, a TV commercial for private healthcare, and I was talking about that with my family, and then I was starting to think about when the last time I had a full checkup, and I turned 50 in April, and I realised I'd not had an MOT, I'd not had my bloods done, I'd not had my prostate checked ever, and I just thought, I've lost a couple of people that I grew up with. They passed away now, and I thought that could have been me, and I just thought, imagine if there's something going on, and I don't even bother to check it or get myself checked out, and you'll have to leave my family, you know, without a father, or, you know. And I know it's an extreme, but we always think it's going to happen to somebody else. So this is about your wake-up call. At what point is your wake-up call? When are you going to go, do you know what, I need to check myself? And mine was losing my dad and losing some friends at my age. And my dad had a cough for quite a long time. And I kept telling him, and he said, oh, it's just a cough. I've had it, it comes and goes. And then we found out when he actually had a seizure, and we had him checked, and he had lung cancer, but it had already spread to his brain, and he passed away 2 weeks after that. So if that doesn't wake you up and say, mate, get yourself checked and don't ignore anything, that's all I'm here to do, is just to say, if anybody's watching this or listening to this, don't wait. Just, especially if you're around my age, get yourself checked out. Ignoring it isn't an option.
Yeah, we're not of dissimilar age, and I also have that experience of losing a dad, and, you know, getting things checked out was just not, you know, even though there was something obvious that was going on. And I remember a conversation in the kitchen when he said to me, oh, I've got this thing on my gum. He said, it can't be serious, can it, because it's on my gum. You know, it's like, well, you better get it checked out, Dad. And, you know, of course, he did eventually, but by then there was, you know, the worst diagnosis you don't want to hear. And it proves the point. And I tell you what I did, Will, recently, and I have done this more than once, so I'm only slightly ahead of the curve on you on this one. But I had a full blood test, and I came to the realisation, somebody had said to me, you can get a full, I can't remember what the cost was to get the full blood test, but there was a clinic nearby that was doing it. But I worked out that I'd spent more service in my car the week before, and I thought, that's weird, isn't it? I'm willing to spend 300 quid for the annual service, but I'm not willing to spend 200 quid. I wouldn't have thought about spending 200 quid to have a complete blood test. And when I looked at it like that, I thought, well, this is an obvious no-brainer.
It is. I mean, you talk about your father, and my father was the same about not going. He never went to the dentist. My dad used to do his own dentistry. He'd pull his own teeth out, he'd fill it himself. He just wouldn't bother. He was of that generation.
Yeah.
But you're right about that. We subscribed to TV channels. We subscribed to all these subscription channels, sport, movies, all them other ones. But you can actually get private healthcare for £4 a week with Burnham Health. That's how cheap it is, for the price of a coffee. But instead of doing that, we'll go, no, I'll spend money on other things, when our health is our wealth. I mean, if you're not healthy, what else have you got? And I think we take for granted when we're feeling good. We think, I feel all right, I don't need to have a check. Yeah. Well, no, because any underlying issues, you won't feel bad until it's got to a point where it might not be fixable or treatable. I went and had a full body scan done. I had my blood test. I had the prostate checked, which another thing I want to say is, I know men are a bit squeamish about the prostate examination. You don't have to have the digital examination anymore. Blood test is fine. But also you can have a scan over your belly, like they do for the 12-week scan for ladies when they're pregnant. I had that done, and they can see if it's inflamed. Yeah. There's so much out there. It's not worth the risk. Yeah. Just have an MOT. And I know there's a chance you might get bad news, but it's better to find out earlier than later. That's all I'm trying to say.
Were you pregnant, by the way, when you had that scan, Will? Did you...
Yeah, I felt something kicking, but I think it was a curry from the night before.
I think it probably was. I mean, all this stuff is pretty obvious. Women are much better, of course, at this, and maybe there's, I don't know whether there's sort of nature reasons for that. I have no idea. But blokes, you know, we have been pretty appalling, and yet the funny thing in the world we currently live in, we've never been more aware of health and keeping fit and looking after yourself, but simultaneously, when it comes to the real crunch, prostate is an obvious example that gets talked about a little more these days. We're still a bit hopeless on getting it sorted. So the advice is, you know, it's not about waiting for a symptom. It's kind of preemptive, if you like.
Yeah, it's your wake-up call. That's what this is all about. It's what is your wake-up call? I actually interviewed 3 different people. It's out on my social media where you can see all that, about what their wake-up call was. And, you know, they were fit. One of them was a rugby player, a bit overweight, drank quite a bit, and he went to pick his daughter up out of a cot, and he actually had a stroke, and he's only in his 30s.
Wow.
And then he realised he had blood clot, and all that, it just changed his lifestyle immediately. And I think listening to somebody else's story can be your wake-up call. This can be your wake-up call, you know, to go, I'm going to get myself checked. You know, what's the worst thing that can happen? You know, the best thing, any result you could have is knowledge. Knowledge is power. So, yeah, I don't live like a monk. I like a drink. I like going to the pub. I like going for takeaways. And I like enjoying food, all that sort of stuff. But there's a balance to this. There really is a balance. So live your life, but get yourself checked. You know, don't put things off. That's all I'm trying to say.
Indeed. Just on a completely separate point, Will, it would be ridiculous if I didn't ask you this, because you're a Stockport lad, so this is right in your own backyard. The seat of power, of course, today has gone to your neck of the woods. Mr. Burnham has taken the baton to Manchester. Number 10 North is open for business. Everything's changing. Did you wake up feeling like a new man today, where democracy was finally realised?
No. Listen, at the end, do you know what I'm glad about? And this is, I don't know whether it's a northern thing. I'm glad there's someone's in number 10 who sounds a little bit like me. Who sounds a bit, I come from a working class council estate background. I'm very proud of that. And he sounds a little bit like the rest of us.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like he comes from Eton, which is, listen, I'm not knocking anyone who does come from Eton, but I'm not sure that they know exactly how the rest of the country lives.
Yeah.
Most of the people in this country live. And I hope he's got more of a connection to the people of this country. And you know what? I'm not going to knock anybody until they've done something wrong. I think let's give him a chance. Let's see what happens. I don't vote one way or another because I prefer one party or another. I vote for what I think is best for this country. And I think if we all did that, we'd be in a better place rather than arguing over one point over another. Let's just try and put the country first and see what's better for us. Rather than battling over politics all the time.
Yeah, no, absolutely spot on. I remember my dad saying to me, funnily enough, you mentioned that, and, you know, from a similar background as, exactly the same background as you, as I am, Will, when John Major got elected, he said, well, you know, he might be a Tory, but at least he's because he came from a working class background as well. Unfortunately, John Major didn't sound like a normal bloke, did he? I mean, he, unfortunately, any credentials he had in that area was slightly lost.
Yeah. Well, you know, all I can say is the change, hopefully it's going to be good. Who knows? I mean, we've got to do something about the cost of living in this country. We can't keep charging us more for less. I mean, balance that out for starters. I mean, why are we getting charged double and getting less for it? That baffles my head. I'm paying £4,000 a year in council tax. You try and get the council to do anything. Yeah. It's unbelievable. I've had to wait 2 years to have a tree taken out that could have killed somebody outside the front of my house. 2 years. I mean, what am I paying for? Potholes everywhere. Yeah. So let's just balance the ship a little bit. You know, let's start paying for what we're getting.
Absolutely bang on. Listen, Will, and all that health advice we spoke about, the important stuff there, we want everybody to take that on board too. Really good to see you again. Thank you for joining us. Will Mellor, the actor who's campaigning along with Bennenden Health on that issue of getting a bit of preemptive stuff going on, blood tests and check things out, etc. It is sort of common sense stuff. By the way, the council didn't take my food waste yesterday. Can you believe that? You know when you go to take your bins in at the end of the day? Bloody new bin. I'm only on week 6. Went to take it in. I thought, was this heavy? I thought there was a cat in there. I wondered what it was. I opened it up. The food was still in there. So what's your council tax for? So this never happened under Keir Starmer. That's all I'm saying, all right? It's only happened under Andy Burnham. Food waste is not being collected. And I don't want to over-dramatise the point, but this is literally how the Great Plague began. OK? You know, read your history books. It's not pretty. It's bubonic and not pretty. Let's go to Mark in Lincolnshire on Andy Burnham. What are you thinking, Mark? Afternoon to you.
Afternoon, Ian, mate. Hiya, mate. Bubonic plague didn't start with rats. It was the fleas on the rats, by the way.
It was the what?
It was the fleas that were on the rats that spread the bubonic plague.
OK, all right, well... Oh, yeah, Jeff, for one split second, I literally thought the bubonic plague was going to start by about 3:30 on Sunday, but you've now put my mind to rest, Mark.
That's all right, you're welcome, mate.
Thank you.
And Andy Burnham. Yeah, I mean, my initial thing with him anyway is, you know, let's give him a few months to at least hang himself, if you know what I mean. At the moment, I think you can discernibly say that, if nothing else, he started a hell of a lot more positively than Starmer has. You know, in the 2 years that Starmer was doing this job, Burnham's achieved more in less than a week than he's managed. You know, when you look at the North Sea oil thing, you know, even as some as minor as, you know, the bus stuff and all the rest of it. But at least he's trying to do something a bit more positive, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So I think that at least earned him enough respect to give him a few months to see exactly how he goes. As I say, to at least hang himself, you know.
This is the point, isn't it? Because it is too early, and you could... I mentioned that little list earlier, Mark, didn't I, about digital ID gone, violent prisoners being released. That's not happening. Drilling in the North Sea, that is going to be happening. So, you know, you and I and others have discussed this for the last couple of years, asking for all this stuff to be the case. And Andy Burnham has made it happen. But I don't think we can assess everything. I mean, he's only on day, 5, so it's a bit early.
Well, that's my point at the end of the day. And, you know, we're talking less than a week, so when I hear people that are ringing up and they're all hysterical about how terrible this is all going to be, well, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, well, so far he's not doing that bad. Yeah. You know, don't get me wrong, I don't particularly want him in power, but, you know, we're stuck with him for 3 years. As soon as he went on as he is now, if that makes sense. And to be honest with you, if the guy went fully classic Labour like he keeps saying he's going to, then he'd get rid of all the illegals. You know, he drastically...
That's the bit that he hasn't mentioned, isn't it? I'm really surprised.
Yeah, he hasn't talked about it. And it's hard to know exactly where he's going to stand on it, to be honest, because...
I think it's strategic. I think it's strategic, Mark, that he hasn't touched it.
Yeah, well, he's going to get a lot of grief from a lot on his backbenchers, isn't he? I think, personally, his own view on this, being a fellow Northerner, I think he is a lot more classic Labour than people give him credit for. You know, he probably sees himself more as a 70s, 80s Labour kind of guy.
Maybe, yeah.
And if he is, then he probably is going to try and do something about the immigration situation.
Well,
if he starts tackling all this stuff, Ian.
Listen, if we go by what a previous guest was saying, that it's possible that what he's doing is gearing up for a snap election at some point, then maybe he's waiting for the immigration card to play at that point, and he's going to come out with an absolutely belting solution. I'm not hopeful that is the case. It's interesting you say about being a sort of 70s, 80s kind of character. I don't know if you noticed that Neil Kinnock was in the audience when he sort of did his big initiation speech, or whatever you want to call it. Now, Kinnock's an interesting character because he obviously sounds like the absolute stereotypical example of a left-wing firebrand. But, of course, Kinnock was the real reformer of Labour before Blair. Kinnock laid the foundations. Kinnock was the one that got rid of the militant tendency in the Labour Party before Blair was able to kind of put the icing on the cake. So that makes you wonder where Burnham really is. He's not, he's clearly not going pre-Kinnock. He's going more Blair.
Yeah, I think he's probably trying to find a medium between the two, to be honest with you. I think, from my point of view, what you're saying there about, him snap election and just then popping out the immigration card. Well, if he makes a promise on immigration, given what he's already doing in less than a week, it would be hard to disagree that he's not going to do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get you.
He is going to create... If this is the case, and what we're suggesting here is correct, then Reform have got a really big bloody problem.
It would be huge. I mean, everybody would have a problem, wouldn't they? The headache would be shared if Burnham is going to solve everything, almost messianic-like. Listen, Mark, I've got to run, but that's a brilliant point, a great discussion as well. Thank you for that. Mark Hill says, Ian, my food wasn't collected yesterday either. Other streets nearby looked like they had been. So that was strange, giving them one more chance next week when it's all going into the black bin. I was thinking of going up the council office. I mean, I got really annoyed about it because those bins aren't big and you can only really fit a week's worth of old grub inside those things. So we're going to have to do something with we've got nowhere else to put it other than in the actual bin now, which is a bit annoying because that wasn't the point of it. But I did have that moment of doing a sort of one-man protest up at the council office where you're meant to, if it was a movie, you'd go up there, wouldn't you, and tip it on the reception desk and say, what about this? I paid for this. But that wouldn't be very kind, decent, and probably illegal. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
I thought it was disgraceful, and you know, cabinet ministers are allowed to joke about things, but to joke about the fact that we've released 50,000 prisoners from jails under the Labour government since they came to power, I think is extraordinary, and I think it just reveals the contempt that there is. Like, Labour ministers just don't think that that matters. I think it's disgusting, and you can only imagine how PC Andrew Harper's family feel about that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. We'll be talking to Kevin O'Sullivan at 15:57, so we look forward to that. In the meantime, Shirley is in the Cotswolds. What do you got for us, Shirley? Afternoon to you.
Hello, good afternoon, Ian. Ian, just a couple of points. The first one is that I definitely think that Andy Burnham is putting out a few little bites, positive bites. I think he's giving himself time to look at the whole immigration situation before he speaks about it. But I can put money on it. He's going to call an election while Nigel Farage is under investigation and they're at their weakest, and so are the Tories. I think he's going to call a snap election very soon.
It's interesting, just on that point, Shirley. I mean, somebody said, it's not new to say this kind of thing, but Andy Burnham is at his most powerful and popular right now. Yep, it's not going to. This is the peak. So if he's going to try and call an election before 2029, you're right. In the next few months would be the time.
Yeah, definitely. And the other one is, with so much, we've been hearing this, and BBC are still banging on about climate change, and that guy that they have, he's got a permanent suntan at the moment. So
is he the fellow whose arms are all over the place?
Yeah, him, and he's obviously spending quite a lot of time in the sun, so it doesn't bother him. But will Andy Burnham? I know. Will Andy Burnham, I think, with all this talk of our summers are going to get hotter and hotter, every year they're going to get hotter than we've had this year. If that was the case, and if we could really believe it, why aren't any governments talking about investing in our holiday destinations? He's right on the doorstep of Southport, Blackpool, even North Wales is not too far from him. And if we're going to get our hotels and restaurants and cafes up to the same standard that we have in Europe. I've just come back from Greece, and there's no comparison to here. It's just fabulous. But if they were really serious about our summers getting hotter, surely they would want people to holiday here, and they would start investing in those areas where people would choose to go.
That's a very good point.
They don't seem to be.
We have. When you think of, I mean, it doesn't have to be seaside places, of course. It could be, you know, wonderful other areas. I mean, you're in the Cotswolds. That's a beautiful neck of the woods. And you've got the Peak District, the Lake District, all these wonderful areas. I mean, large chunks of Yorkshire or Kent are, you know, full of beautiful locations. But on the seaside thing, the beach thing, we've never quite got it fully right. I went down to Folkestone. It was on Father's Day, so I went down to Folkestone, and there were little bits. I used to work down in that place, so I know it well. And it was kind of about sort of 10% in terms of refurbishing it. It still looked, with a British seaside place, when it's not lively, looks particularly grim, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can go to the Costa del Sol or some nice Greek island, and even in the winter, they can still look like, it's fairly inviting, but Folkestone looks awful in in December.
Yeah, definitely. And I think if they wanted us to believe what they're telling us, they would be sprucing up all of these beautiful areas. Well, what used to be, I used to go to Blackpool as a little girl, and it was just an idyllic holiday, and it's not now. And they should be investing. If they really think we're going to get hot summers, well, let's prepare ourselves now. So let's see what Andy the Messiah does.
Let's see what he does. Shirley, have a great weekend. Thank you for that. Blackpool in particular was, and I also worked in Blackpool. I lived in Blackpool for over a year, maybe 18 months, something like that. When I was a kid, it was the one seaside place I'd never been to. And yet it was my God, every time I saw Blackpool on TV, I wanted to be there. When you watch those sort of summertime variety specials on the TV that Jimmy Tarbuck would front or something like that, when they were in Blackpool, it was just the bastion of everything exciting and seaside. They had the pleasure beach, the tower, the lights. Obviously, the lights aren't on in the summer, but all of that, I thought, this is like the seaside towns, and then there's Blackpool. This was Premier League stuff. They were the Man City or the Arsenal of seaside towns. And then I lived there, and it was kind of still a bit of that. They'd expanded into, they had other things going on. The pleasure beach had got busy. But recently, it has properly suffered I mean, you've got places like St Anne's down the road where there's a few more quid to go around, and you've got, obviously, you know, international golf tournaments take place there. There's the tale of two halves, if you like, and some beautiful housing. But then Blackpool itself, sort of the town of and surrounding areas, have really suffered. And I don't know whether that's a lack of investment, a lick of paint, employment is a big issue. There's all sorts going on.
I'll tell you what to sort that out.
What's that?
If we had like a number 10 Downing Street, only it was in Manchester, that would sort out those northern towns' problems, wouldn't it? I just cannot get my head around it. What on earth is number 10 North for? I mean, it's these swish offices that obviously cost a lot of money. Yeah. He flew by private prime ministerial jet last night to Glasgow for the opening of the Commonwealth Games, then flew down to Manchester. On the prime ministerial jet. I estimate the cost of that was about 25 grand. When he flies up every Friday, which is what he plans to do for his 1 day a week in number 10 North, that's going to cost, I've been looking this up on AI, between 10 and 18,000 pounds every flight.
Blimey.
So he's going to spend sort of around about £30,000 flying up there and flying back every week. Not to mention all the civil servants and spads who've got to schlep all the way up there. Civil servants are currently being offered generous relocation packages to move to